Westbound exit slip to the A508 has one lane closed for repairs. Wokingham's M4 westbound at Junction 10 has 2 lanes closed for roadworks. The M27 eastbound exit slip at Junction 12 in Portsmouth is fully closed for roadworks. For more travel news, go to gbnews.com.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
Now imagine this. You spend your entire life dreaming of public service. You work your way up to become the Director of Public Prosecutions. You then become a Member of Parliament, and just next to your constituency is a world-famous museum hosting
I'm imagining it, Tom.
waxworks of famous figures, and you dream that one day you will be featured in this mausoleum, for want of a better word. You become Prime Minister, and you think, now, finally, my waxwork will be on display at the world-famous Madame Tussauds. And then they say no.
And then you find out that Theresa May has one.
Oh.
Yes, so Madame Tussauds... There's Theresa May. There she is in her suit.
Yeah,
she was always one for colourful outfits,
Theresa May has a waxwork there, so does Boris Johnson, of course. It's reasonable to expect the Prime Minister would have thought that he would join the likes of David Cameron, Theresa May and Boris Johnson with a waxwork.
Winston Churchill.
Yeah.
Winston Churchill has one. Harold Macmillan, apparently, was previously displayed. Tony Blair.
Of course.
Tony Blair, of course. But apparently, so Madame Tussauds can't be sure that he'll still be relevant in 5 years' time. That's the reason.
Is that why they've said it? No.
They can't be sure, so they don't want to put the money into it, presumably.
Wow.
I could imagine Keir Starmer commissioning his own.
And yet, Lord Salisbury had a waxwork, the Marquis of Salisbury, Harold Macmillan and David Lloyd George, of course. But the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland...
Think about this.
...does not have a waxwork because he's not relevant.
A spokesperson told the Metro, "We have no current plans to make a figure of the British Prime Minister."
GB News, the People's Channel.
Good morning, it's 9:30 on Monday the 23rd of June, live across the UK, Britain's Newsroom with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
Very good morning. So, Iran has vowed revenge.
To reassure the British public that we're doing everything we can to stabilise the situation, to de-escalate the situation and to get to a negotiated outcome.
So growing terror fears in Britain as Iran pledges payback on the US and its allies after that attack on their nuclear infrastructure. The US Defence Secretary Pete Hegseth was pleased with the mission.
It was an incredible and overwhelming success.
And do we need a non-dom shake-up? Just this morning, Reform UK leader Nigel Farage has pledged to charge non-doms £250,000 and to give the proceeds to the less well-off. Do you support this interesting financial idea?
And political protest. Palestine Action is mounting a rally in central London as the Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, is poised to label the movement a terrorist group.
And look at this heatwave hero. A Just Eat delivery driver came to the rescue of dozens of passengers stranded on a train on Saturday. He threw bottles of water a really significant distance into the air to those struggling in the sweltering heat.
Good on him. And the fat jabs rollout. GPs in England can now prescribe for the first time those weight loss shots. 220,000 patients are expected to benefit.
And it's School Diversity Week. Primary and secondary schools are being encouraged to wear pride colours and take part in LGBTQ+ lessons this week in a push for inclusion. Should children be talking, thinking, discussing sexuality in this way?
And the scripts. Now, did you see the BBC newsreader Martine Croxall correct the autocue when she looked fed up of gender-neutral language? Just take a listen to this.
Malcolm Mystery, who was involved in the research, says that the aged, pregnant people, women, and those with pre-existing health conditions need to take precautions.
I think we can be absolutely certain it would never say pregnant people on a GB News autocue.
Oh, Maxine, we feel your pain. Martine, sorry. We feel your pain because that sigh, that little... That's what we would be like if we had to work at the BBC.
Well, they wouldn't let me work at the BBC. I wouldn't be allowed through the door. But pregnant people is an offensive, ridiculous part of this woke agenda, and it's, I think, what cost Penny Mordaunt the Tory leadership.
Yeah.
Because when she was a minister, she used the phrase in the House of Commons, she said she was just responding to the brief. She could have changed the brief like Martin Croxall did.
Well, I wrote a book 10 years ago called The Happy Birth Book because, as some of you will know, I used to work with pregnant couples and I would give them antenatal education. It was a real passion area of mine. When we wrote the book, we actually had the discussion then, 10 years ago, if we'd talk about pregnant people.
Oh, God.
And I pushed back really hard and said, do not be ridiculous, we're talking about pregnant women. But my point being that it was, even then, there was very powerful lobbyist, trans activists infiltrating the NHS to talk about pregnant people and really brainwashing the midwives, put a lot of pressure on the midwives to use that wording.
And you would think after the Supreme Court ruling and the Cass review, it'd be interesting to see if that newsreader gets into trouble at the BBC.
Oh, I'm sure she will. I'm sure she will. She might be working here any minute now. Look, I think she's great because she's done a few slightly controversial things. And Diversity Week at school.
So who decided we need a Diversity Week in the schools?
Well...
Why do primary school children need to have a Diversity Week? Why can't they have a History Week?
Yet
or
again...
Algebra Week?
Because that's not important anymore, Andrew. All that's important is who you want to have sex with, it seems, at school. That's what they're talking about. Why? Because, yet again, activists infiltrating organisations, now in this case education, infiltrating, changing the ideology, making it the pressure.
Why do 9-year-olds need to know about sexuality? They just don't know. Well, primary, you're 7, aren't you? 7 till 11.
Primary school's 4. 4 rising 5, if you're one of the younger ones, or
Too
5.
Young, and the Diversity Week has been created by a charity. Well, there are more important things for kids to be doing, I'm afraid, in our primary schools this week. So, as I say, why can't we have a History Week or a Sport Week?
You could argue, yeah, absolutely, that would be wonderful, no such thing. When you were at school, it would have been beneficial, OK? As somebody that then eventually came out as gay later on in life, to no doubt prejudice and discrimination and bullying, that period, we needed that education, all right? We definitely were living in an age then where there was a huge amount of discrimination. Not anymore. It's like, maybe I'm wrong.
The pendulum
Tell me if I'm wrong.
has swung too far the other way now.
Correct.
That's what I think.
And so British children, they shrug, they're like, we don't care. We don't care. We love who you like, marry who you want. We don't care anymore.
No.
So why are we having to talk about it so much in schools? Because it feels like the priorities aren't quite right.
I know. I wonder what people think at home. Do you want your grandchildren, age 5, 6, being taught about diversity and LGBTQ?
GBNews.com. /your say to get in touch with us this morning. And this Nigel, we're going to be reflecting on Nigel Farage's announcement this morning about tax issues. So we're doing things a little bit differently this morning in terms of the news bulletin. We are going to be getting to Tatiana Sanchez in just a moment, but let's go now to... I think our guest is here.
No, I think we're going to be talking, of course, about the extraordinary events of the last 48 hours with Iran. Yeah. So those cluster bombs, and we're going to talk to two. But first of all, we're going to talk about non-doms because I think it's a big statement today by Nigel Farage. Non-doms will now pay £250,000 every decade. They can stay in Britain. And the proceeds, they say, they will raise from that will go to the lowest income earners who could get a tax-free dividend of £600 a year.
And therefore it means also that those non-doms would have more preferable tax status when they're in...
Well, they stay here.
They stay here, basically. Yeah, exactly.
It's to stop the drain of money that's leaving. Let's speak to two guests who may have different views on this. The former Labour MP, Khalid Mahmood, and former Tory MP, Heather Wheeler. Heather, if you don't mind, I'm going to go to you first, because I think here Farage is parking his tanks on the Tory lawn. The Tories have opposed the changes to non-dom status, which has seen lots of millionaires leaving the country. Do you think this is clever politics by Farage here?
I think it's overdue, and clarity on this is very, very important. It is utterly ridiculous but the Labour government have brought in these measures, which means people are leaving in their droves. And the reason why this is so bad, what they're doing, is that the tax take has now gone down. So it's completely ruined what they were trying to achieve. They can squeal as long as they like about taxing the rich till the pipsqueak and all that. But if the money disappears, what is the point? So the reason why the non-dom arrangement worked really well was that we had those entrepreneurs, we had those wealthy people buying property, buying land, farming, making sure our farms were keeping going, all sorts of things, keeping our shops going, keeping our restaurants going. And when you have that mass exodus, it's utterly ridiculous. So this is in the box of something had to be done. And we will get there. We will put out our tax arrangements when it gets nearer to the time. But it's definitely, when you look on an economic conversation on the Laffer curve, Labour have absolutely ruined it, and it is tax take is tanking.
Khalid Mahmood, Heather Wheeler's right, isn't she? Some estimates that a millionaire is leaving this country every 45 minutes. Millionaires create jobs, they spend money here and they pay their taxes here. So this is quite clever of Farage to try to stop the drain of millionaires, isn't it?
Well, yeah, I mean, look, basically, as my view's been always that I think what we've got to do is use the best people around and get the best taxes available for most of the people. I think the policy that we've had in terms of non-doms is nonsensical. It hasn't delivered what we wanted it to deliver. And I think part of the party's got to realise that the politics of envy has got to stop. And what we've got to do is move forward and be in the modern era to do this. In order to move forward, what we've got to do is get more businesses up and running. We've got to get more development up and running. We've got to get more infrastructure, where we've announced a huge amount of money coming through to deal with that. And we need those people to stay in the country to be able to make sure to make those investments and to move forward.
A lot of people are saying they can't. It's confusing them. And The Guardian reporting this story is very confused by the idea that Nigel Farage might be taking from the rich to give to the poor. How disruptive is reform at the moment, would you say, Heather, to people's perceptions of left versus right, Tories versus Labour? It is unprecedented, really, isn't it, to see this much disruption?
It is difficult on the political scenario, because when you're talking about issues that would automatically say, I'm going to look after the millionaires, but at the same time say, I'm automatically going to look after the lower paid workers, then that is a conundrum. Absolutely, I get that. But the joke really is, when the non-dom money came in anyway, it went into the tax take. It meant that we had money for education. It meant we had money for health. It meant we had money to pay benefits for people who really couldn't work, who really were sick, the PIP payments and what have you, to help people who were disabled get back into work. So it's a little bit disingenuous to say it's going to be hypothecated for one area. Certainly the Treasury wouldn't like that. That would be an absolute no-no at the Treasury.
And Heather, if they came wooing you, reform, are you staying true to the Tory cause? Is Kemi Badenoch inspiring you? Is she putting fire in your belly, the Tory leader?
Well, of course, Kemi is doing a good job. The last two PMQs, she's knocked it out the park. The latest poll have us above Labour. So it is a slow climb. I have to accept that, but we will get there. More and more detail comes out with policy. She's a very thoughtful lady, a very thoughtful lady. And what people like about Kemi is when she says something, she's already thought about it, it's not off the cuff, and she absolutely means it, and she will absolutely take it through to the end.
Khalid, your eyebrows were lifting there at that analysis of Kemi Badenoch as being measured and thoughtful.
Well, I think that is a lot of wishful thinking by Heather. I think Kemi hasn't really understood most of the issues where we're dealing with. What we need to do is to look, first of all, one of the key things that we need to do in terms of taxation is look at our self-employed people, those people who wanted to get on, those people who are the strivers, they wanted to move up, and they've been hammered by the IR35 situation. And what we've got to do, I think, is get in there and support those working people who want to move forward, who've taken the decision that they wanted to work for themselves, they want to move forward and make a difference to their families, to their lives. And this IR35 has been absolutely crippling for those people.
Well, Khalid, your lot have done nothing about it.
Well, that's one of the things that we're hoping that we're going to move forward with in order to address all of these issues, which is where we're coming into, is to look at now, after a very sort of, I think, a storming first year, there's been a lot of issues. We've had to deal with a huge black hole in terms of the Conservatives. What we're trying to do now is get into to more secure footing. The investment in the infrastructure the Chancellor has just announced is a huge positive way forward. And what we've got to look at is how we can continue to support people who are in a bracket where they get taxed hugely. And it isn't structured. We've got to simplify the tax system. That's one of the long-standing promises by all governments. And I think this government's got to get hold of it and simplify the tax structures.
All right. That's former Labour MP Khalid Mahmood and former Conservative MP Heather Wheeler, who I think are agreeing on more than perhaps we expected. Very nice to talk to you both. Good to see you.
Thank you both. Let us know what you think of Reform's idea, £250,000 to get non-dom status here.
And when the Guardian are willfully missing the point. The point about why they're doing this is because the changes to non-dom status in this country since Labour got in has meant millionaires are fleeing. Yeah. And they're going to have to pay, so they're going to have to pay more tax on their worldwide income, but also they're going to have to pay inheritance tax on their fortune, even if the money is based abroad. So this is Reform trying to say we're going to stop the exodus. A one-off payment of $250,000 over 10 years. It used to be £30,000 a year. So it's a clever move, and the revenue from it would go to poorer, the people at the lowest end of the income scale.
They say that, but as we just heard, it's not hypothetical,
no,
is it? But it is very clever. Let us know what you think. Right, let's move on now. This story made us smile over the weekend. This is BBC newsreader Martine Croxall. She corrected the auto cue. Just look at the slight roll of the eye at the wokery. Here she is.
London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine has released research which says that nearly 600 heat-related deaths are expected in the UK. Malcolm Mystery, who is involved in the research, says that the aged, pregnant people, women, and those with pre-existing health conditions need to take precautions.
I love it. Women, in other words. Well, on Twitter, J.K. Rowling posted that, and she said, "My new favourite BBC presenter." Martine herself, who only had a few followers on X until this weekend, she wasn't really terribly busy on social media. She's just clearly doing a job and rolling her eyes in the background of the BBC. Well, she went to X and she said a huge thank you to everyone who's chosen to follow me today for whatever reason. It's been quite a ride, and she's now got over 100,000 followers, having had just a couple of thousand at the start of the week.
It just shows where the public is on this and how the BBC is yet again completely out of step. By the way, if that had been in our auto cue, Beverly or I would have corrected it. We would have said, we don't call them pregnant people, they're pregnant women. But I can't conceive that it would ever be in a GB News auto cue.
Why? Because we like to think we are on board with the vast majority of the British public in the way that the BBC seems increasingly to demonstrate that it is not.
We're on board with the entire British public. It is a minuscule proportion of people think you talk about pregnant people. Tiny.
Why? Because it is a minuscule proportion of women who transition to being men and then choose to get pregnant and have babies. So welcome to sanity.
Yeah.
Stay with us. We're here till midday.
Exactly. Now, still ahead, Palestine Action is going to be prescribed as a terrorist group today after they vandalised planes at RAF Bryce Norton in, frankly, what I regard as one of the worst security breaches at a major British defence institution for years.
We're watching the footage here as they sprayed red paint into the engines of these planes. As you say, how did it happen? And, of course, if it wasn't for events over the weekend, that would be the main story. But Iran has vowed revenge on America.
They cycled in.
Not Iran, the people who went into that, So its allies, after America bombs their nuclear infrastructure. What is it going to mean for Britain? Are you frightened by this latest turn of events? Let us know. First, though, holiday sun, European destinations.
Can't wait to get in that sea.
Lovely and warm.
Just like the feeling of having great travel insurance.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News travel destinations forecast.
Following a peak in the temperatures across the western Mediterranean in the last few days, it is now turning fresher. There are a few showers to watch out for, particularly across areas of Iberia, Generally, though, further east, it's high pressure in charge, and that's allowing the heat to also transfer eastwards. Particularly parts of northern Italy into the Balkans will see those temperatures climbing, but the high pressure also means there'll be plentiful amounts of sunshine for these regions right throughout the week.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News, the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
Vegetarians now have a greater desire to wield power more than their meat-eating counterparts. I mean, you like a sausage, don't you, Biggins?
I like a sausage, but I have gone off meat per se, funnily enough, as I'm getting older. I think there are, you know, it takes a lot of eating a piece of meat, if you pardon the expression.
And the older you get, the more you find that it takes a lot of eating.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I must admit, I have more of a conscience about eating meat as I get older.
Yeah.
And that's a fondness of animals brings that. And if you ever go on Instagram and you look at cows and horses and pigs,
they're wonderful.
They're all affectionate and incredible.
Gorgeous.
Yeah.
And there we are, putting it into our mouths and eating it.
What do you think about the move to enforce vegetarianism on people, though? Because especially in schools and some universities, there's this trend for Meat-Free Monday, where there's this enforced absence of meat on children.
I think it's ridiculous. Let kids do what they want, to be honest with. Within reason, obviously, a healthy diet, da-da-da-da-da. But no, I think, you know, I don't eat meat, the husband eats meat. It's not an issue. Eat what you want. But I think that the fact that they're trying to force this into schools, look, let kids experiment, give them a vegetarian option.
Yes,
let them
and all
see
schools do that.
Just options.
It has just become political, and also there's a lot of misinformation out there. So I know children are often told that eating meat is terrible for the environment, but importing avocados thousands of miles is also terrible for the environment.
But also, I mean, a lot of vegetarian meals, are certainly processed vegetarian meals, have got a load of salt and fat and sugar in them, so they're actually worse for you than eating a lean piece of meat.
I think the tide is turning now, because the new trend amongst young people, particularly young men, is protein. Chicken, breasts, tuna. That's the new trend, to get as much protein in them as possible. It's very difficult to do when you're vegetarian.
GB News, the People's Channel.
At GB News, we love to hear from you, our viewers and listeners. So drop us a line at gbnews.com/yoursay. There you can talk to each other and also to the presenters live on air. gbnews.com/yoursay, because GB News is your channel, Britain's news channel.
No matter the state it's in, this is our nation. Join me, Jacob Rees-Mogg, for a genuine, honest discussion on where we have been, where we are going, and where we are with the people who set the direction. That's State of the Nation every Monday and Tuesday at 8 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
We're joined in the studio by Shadow Defence Minister Mark Francois. Mark, can I just ask you, firstly, I'm fed up with ministers not answering a very straightforward question. America bombed Iran's nuclear facility. Does the government support it? We've had the Defence Minister refusing to answer it. J.P. Lammy sort of implying he endorsed it, but they won't say it. Is the Conservative Party quite clear about this?
Yes, we do support it, because there was a risk that Iran would achieve a nuclear weapon. Look, for years, they've been forestalling these negotiations with the West whilst trying to develop a bomb in secret. I mean, the world knows this. President Trump has taken decisive action to remove the threat of Iran developing a nuclear weapon. That should make the world safer. I can't see how the world would be made safer by the Iranian mullahs having the bomb. So the Americans, and Trump gave them fair warning. He told them weeks in advance that if they didn't come to an acceptable deal about enriching uranium, or rather stopping doing it, he would take action. So he's basically called their bluff and followed through, and we support that, as it were, to disarm Iran from attempting to get a nuclear weapon. Now, why cannot the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom say in a straightforward way whether or not he supports it. As you say, it's a binary question.
Well, possibly because he doesn't want us dragged into it.
Well, if he doesn't support it, he should say so. If he does support it, he should say so. I mean, I hope...
do that and upset the most powerful man in the world in Donald Trump.
Well, I think he'll upset the most powerful man in the world more if he doesn't, by sitting on the fence. You know, as the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, in a situation like this, you cannot govern with a fence post up your derriere. You have to take a decision. But look, there's a pattern here. It's a weak government, right? Everyone knows. Look, they surrendered to the train drivers over pay as soon as they came into office. They've surrendered to the EU over our fishing rights. They surrendered to Mauritius over the Chagos Islands. They surrendered to Spain over the border with Gibraltar. They've surrendered to Jerry Adams over Northern Ireland veterans. And now they've surrendered to China over the super embassy at Tower Hill. I mean, everyone sees this is a weak government, absolutely hidebound by an obsession with human rights. So they're going to try it on, aren't they? You know, the first duty of government, you've heard me say this in the studio before, is the defence of the realm. And you need a Prime Minister and a government that are prepared to do that.
On the defence of the realm, how on earth did these protesters penetrate the perimeter fence at Brize Norton and wreak £25 million of damage on 2 RAF jets? How did that happen?
Well, and they were quite close.
And no headers rolled.
Right. We called on Friday for the government to make a statement because the House was sitting. I mean, there was important business we were discussing, but, you know, the government can interrupt and make a statement at any time, or it could have done it at the end of the day, right? We demanded a statement. They didn't give one. I'm hoping that one way or another in Parliament today, the government will tell us what they know. Now, Brize Norton, it's specifically mentioned in the SDR, the Strategic Defence Review, because it's such an important base. It's basically the RAS equivalent of Heathrow. Part of the problem is it's got an 11-mile perimeter.
We're running out of time, so I think we're going to keep you, Mark, so stay there with us.
Yeah.
Plenty more to come.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, a very good morning to you. This is your GB News weather update provided by the Met Office. It's a bright and breezy start to the week. We've got low pressure sats just to the north of the UK. Quite a lot of isobars on the chart though means some quite blustery winds are coming in from the west, and a few frontal systems could bring some longer spells of rain to the Northern Isles, where we may see gale strength gusts for a time. A scattering of other showers will be pushing in from the northwest. Those to the east of higher ground, though, may manage to stay largely dry. And particularly for the southern half of the UK, will stay largely fine and settled here, with a decent number of sunny spells over the course of the day. Do remember, though, in that sunshine, UV levels will be high since we are just past the summer solstice. Temperatures in the southeast peaking at around 24 degrees Celsius, so fairly pleasant if you're out of the breeze. It will be that little bit fresher and a little cooler up towards the north, generally around mid to high teens here. As we move into the latter stages of the day, we are going to see the cloud build in more readily across western areas, initially across Northern Ireland, but then across other regions as we see these spells of longer rain gradually pushing their way in. Some stronger winds as well developing around this system. The heaviest of the rain likely across some western hills, but we're also starting to see a southwesterly wind, and so we'll see some more humid conditions to start off Tuesday morning across the south and west. It will be that little bit fresher up towards the north. But generally things will continue to push their way eastwards throughout the day. Again, the rain always heaviest out towards the west. Some areas in the east may manage to stay dry, but a lot more cloud around on Tuesday nonetheless. And in that southwesterly theme, temperatures could just knock up that little bit more, now around 26 degrees Celsius in the south and east, 18 there for Edinburgh and Stonehaven. During the rest of this week, it is going to remain fairly changeable, so expect further showers and rain at times, maybe even a few thunderstorms.
A positive outlook through the night will power through to a bright day ahead. Boxed Home Battery Storage, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
Good morning, this is the latest AI travel news from GBNews.com. The M74 at Junction 2A is restricted northbound due to debris. The A44 from Langerig to Trodiralt is closed for resurfacing. In North Yorkshire, a broken down vehicle on the A19 southbound exit to the A172 caused lane closures. In Surrey, lane closures are on the M25 anti-clockwise entry slip at Clackett Lane Services due to a broken down vehicle. The M4 westbound entry slip at Junction 16 in Wiltshire closed due to a collision. And on the trains, major disruption between Cosham and Southampton Central affects services, with buses replacing trains between Woking and Guildford. For more travel news, go to gbnews.com.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
£54,321 in totally tax-free cash could make your year the best yet. How would you react if you got that winning call?
Oh my God, I'm going to cry. Oh my God. Thank you.
You weren't expecting to get that call today, were you?
No, I wasn't.
For another chance to win £54,321 cash, text cash to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message. Or text bonus to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB14 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 1st of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
He can say whatever he wants.
A straight talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m, weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk now?
No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
In fact, has Trump made a good start? No.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints.
How many fingers have I got up?
About 10. So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m, only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
10 a.m. Monday, the 23rd of June, live across the United Kingdom. This is Britain's Newsroom with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
Iran vowing revenge.
Reassure the British public that we're doing everything we can to stabilise the situation, to de-escalate the situation, and to get to a negotiated outcome.
Is that the response you wanted to hear? There are terror fears in Britain today as Iran pledges payback on the United States and its allies after the attack on their nuclear infrastructure. The US Defence Secretary Pete Hegseth was pleased with the mission.
It was an incredible and overwhelming success.
Well, there have been several waves of ballistic missiles launched from Iran into Israel this morning. At least 5 impacts that we know of, creating some power problems in southern Israel.
Major tax shake-up. Reform leader Nigel Farage pledges to charge non-DOMs £250,000 to stay here, and he will give the proceeds to the people earning the least money.
They say, why do we bother? Because the people next door do nothing, and they're pretty much as well off as we are.
And political protest. Palestine Action is mounting a rally in central London today as the Home Secretary is poised to label the movement a terrorist group. This is just 3 days after they humiliated the British government by damaging planes at the RAF base in Brize Norton.
Don't you love this story? The Just Eat delivery driver who came to the rescue of dozens of passengers stranded on a train which was very, very hot. He threw bottled waters quite high up to help them struggling in the heat.
And it's School Diversity Week. Primary and secondary school pupils are being encouraged to wear the rainbow colour of pride, take part in lessons about LGBTQ+ issues, in a push for inclusion. Should this be the preoccupation of school pupils?
And did you see BBC News reader Martin Croxall correct the autocue? She was so fed up with the gender-neutral language commonplace at the Beeb. Take a listen.
Malcolm Mystery, who was involved in the research, says that the aged, pregnant people, women, and those with pre-existing health conditions need to take precautions.
Give that woman a gold star.
I like the body language. We can relate, Martine. Right, lots to get through this morning. Want to hear from you, gbnews.com/your say. First, though, with your headlines, Tatiana Sanchez.
Bev, thank you. The top stories. The Israeli Defence Forces have said more missiles have been launched from Iran towards Israel. Approximately 15 Iranian missiles were launched in the latest wave of attacks, and shrapnel has landed in several locations after they were intercepted, according to reports. That's as President Donald Trump has hailed bullseye strikes on Iran as he calls for a regime change and says it's time to make Iran great again. It comes in the aftermath of the US striking 3 key nuclear sites in Iran. Fears grow as experts warn nuclear material could have been moved ahead of the Operation Midnight Hammer. It comes as satellite images reveal Iran's Fordo nuclear site was severely damaged. It's unclear as to whether it was completely destroyed. Iran's supreme leader broke his silence in reaction to the strikes yesterday on X, stating the enemy had made a grave mistake. Sir Keir Starmer's warned there's a risk of the Middle East crisis spiralling beyond the region. Downing Street says the US president and Sir Keir agreed Tehran must not be allowed to develop a nuclear weapon and called for Iran to return to negotiations. Shadow Defence Secretary James Cartledge spoke to GB News.
Just not clear what he actually thinks of the attacks. If you look at the language, he's talking about, recognising the action has happened, that he's spoken to the president. Does he actually support the actual military action? Because, let's be clear, lots of people say, lots of politicians in this country, lots of our allies, quite rightly, and it's important that they do, they recognise that Iran can't be allowed to have a military nuclear programme, but at the same time it's not clear what the action is that they would take to deal with that.
The Metropolitan Police Chief says he's shocked and frustrated at a planned protest in support of Palestine action in London today. Commissioner Sir Mark Rowley said while the right to protest is essential, actions in support of such a group go beyond what most would see as a legitimate protest. It comes as the Home Secretary Yvette Cooper is understood to be preparing a written statement to put before Parliament today to prescribe the group, effectively branding it a terrorist organisation. On Friday, Palestine Action activists broke into RAF Bryce Norton in Oxfordshire and sprayed 2 military planes with red paint in protest of the UK's support of Israel over the war in Gaza. Meanwhile, at least 22 people have been killed after a suicide bomber opened fire at a church in Syria and then detonated an explosive vest. This is the first such incident since Bashar al-Assad was toppled in December, and officials claim the attacker was a member of the Islamic State terror group. It happened at a Greek Orthodox church in Damascus, which, with estimates suggesting that 350 worshippers were praying there at the time. Witnesses said the perpetrator had his face covered when he began shooting and blew himself up as crowds attempted to remove him from the building. In other news, lowering energy costs for thousands of businesses by scrapping green levies will form a central part of the government's new 10-year industrial strategy. The plan, which may slash energy bills by up to 25% for more than 7,000 UK businesses, is set to be unveiled today alongside other measures hoped to boost growth. Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer called the industrial strategy a turning point for Britain's economy by supporting key industries where there's potential for growth. Acting Shadow Energy Secretary Andrew Bowie criticised the plan, saying the UK needed a serious approach to energy policy that he says tackles the root cause of our high energy prices. A West Yorkshire police officer who'd been reported missing has been found dead, the force has confirmed. Charlie Mitchell, a 26-year-old patrol officer from Halifax, was reported missing from his home in Leeds on Saturday. West Yorkshire police said officers searching St Aidan's Nature Reserve near Leeds found his body at around 5:30 yesterday afternoon. Mr Mitchell's death is not being treated as suspicious. A man has been charged with the murder of a woman found fatally stabbed after a gas explosion at her home in North London. 44-year-old Clifton George was also charged with arson with intent to endanger life after 36-year-old Anna Belbrook was found fatally injured in Stoke Newington just before 5 a.m. last Tuesday. Mr George, who was found with slash injuries, is due to appear in court today. And finally, the mass rollout of weight loss jabs on the NHS in England will begin today as GPs are allowed to prescribe the drugs for the first time. Around 220,000 people with greatest need are expected to receive Mounjaro through the NHS over the next 3 years. It's an anti-diabetic drug which lowers blood sugar levels and slows down how quickly food is digested. Well, from today, GPs in England will be allowed to prescribe Mounjaro to severely obese people who also suffer from a range of other health problems. The medicine makes you feel fuller, so you eat less. In clinical trials, people taking it lost 20% of their body weight. And those are the latest GB News headlines for now. More from me in half an hour.
Well, just before the news, we were chatting to Mark Francois here, and he stayed in the studio with us to talk about the situation in the Middle East.
We're talking about the Brides Norton.
And the Brides.
So just to remind us, so these wretched protesters got through a perimeter fence. They were on e-scooters or e-bikes.
Apparently.
This ought to be one of the most secure defence establishments in Britain, and they were able to do major sabotage to 2 important military jets.
Yes, and reportedly £25 million worth of damage.
And we didn't catch them. Extraordinary.
As far as we know, they're still at large. If they have been apprehended, there's been no announcement. And the thing about the Voyager, which is the aircraft they sabotaged, it can be used for troop transport or for air-to-air refuelling. Now, what about if one of those aircraft had been packed full of aviation fuel and rather than a spray can, they'd had a bomb?
Yeah.
I mean, the consequences of that are appalling to contemplate. So today, in the House of Commons, the government must explain to Parliament what they understand happened and what they're doing about it. The MOD's announced a review of security at all military installations, which is even more urgent after the strike against Iran. We need to know what that actually means. So, A, the government have got to answer questions about Brides Norton, and B, they've got to come off the fence and tell us whether they support the strike on Iran or not.
And this organisation, Palestine, is going to be prescribed as a terror organisation. They're protesting outside Parliament today, so the authorities knew all about them.
Yes, they've known about them for months, and they've attacked a number of defence companies. You know, they've sprayed stuff on their offices. There have been allegations of intimidation of people at freshers' fairs contemplating getting a job in the defence industry. So the government should take in. Some MPs and peers may have trouble getting into Parliament today to debate all this stuff because of the demonstration.
You'd think security at military bases would be top-notch.
Well, it ordinarily should be, but in an era of heightened tension, certainly it should be. So, as I say again, I don't mean to hammer the nail to split the wood, but the job of MPs is to ask questions. We need to ask questions today about security in the House of Commons, and the government have a duty to answer them.
OK, Mark.
Right.
Mark Francois, thank you so much. Right, this morning, Nigel Farage has said that he will reinstate non-dom status for wealthy entrepreneurs if they pay a £250,000 fee, which will be handed to low-income workers.
They'll be issued with a Britannia card after payment, making them exempt from paying inheritance tax. That's the non-doms.
So with us now is GB News' political editor, Christopher Hope. Chris, so where are you? And who are you talking to?
Hi, Beth. Hi, Andrew. Yeah, welcome to Central London here. I'm joined now by Azir Youssef, who is the head of the party's Doge unit and until recently, of course, was the party's chairman. Azir Youssef, this policy, have you been told to do it by donors?
Look, we've worked really hard on this policy, and what it's going to do is make Britain attractive again to the wealth creators, to the job creators, to people who are fleeing this country or not here in this country currently. What we're saying is a Prime Minister, Nigel Farage, and a reform government will make the United Kingdom attractive to the world's wealthiest job creators, but they must pay their fair share. So they'll pay a £250,000 landing tax, and for that they get a Britannia card, which means that they don't pay tax on their foreign earnings. They still pay significant taxes here in the UK. And here's the crucial part. All of that money will be pulled by HMRC at the end of the tax year, and within 90 days of the end of the tax year, they will wire a special dividend to the lowest 10% of earning full-time workers in this country. That's about 2.5 million people. That's waitresses in Cardiff. That's care home workers in Ashfield. These are people who set their alarm clocks. You've got to be in full-time work. These are people who have been up against it, and they've been soaked by successive chancellors. So these are people who are not currently in the country, who are going to voluntarily pay this tax. And we've had great feedback already. There's a website up and running where people can register their interest. There's already a lot of interest there. But they're people who also love Britain. And so what we're saying is we need a prosperous Britain again. That's what Nigel will deliver as Prime Minister. But we also need to repair the social contract in this country.
So how much will you give individuals? £1,000 per worker every year?
So at the low end of our forecast, and they're all here in this document if people fancy reading about it, the low end of our forecast, around 6,000 of these cards will be issued each year. At the higher end, 10,000. If we come in at the lower end, that'll mean a £600 tax-free payment directly into the bank accounts, not lost into, the ether in Whitehall and spent on all wokery and nonsense. We'd much rather British workers, grafters, had that money, £600. At the higher end, it'll be £1,000. It could even be more, Chris, depending on how successful it is. We've had great feedback from such people already. And I want to say this too, a lot of the reason, that £600 is a month's rent in Runcorn, for example, right? As I said, my own mother, she's over 70 now. She still works full-time as a nurse. She would be the kind of person who would benefit from this. And they're seeing their energy bills skyrocket, not actually due to market failure, but because of state failure, for example. And they're seeing the cost of their weekly shop go up. There's a cost of living crisis in this country. So what we're saying is, let's invite the world's wealthiest, the people with the broadest shoulders, who will contribute significantly to the tax stream and ensure that the lowest paid workers in this country share it.
And roughly what are those lowest paid workers on? What kind of income level are they on to receive them?
So it's generally, if you are watching this and you're in full-time work and you're earning less than £23,000 a year, you will benefit from this programme. As I said, that will be calculated at the end of each tax year. And what's really interesting is generally these people will come and they'll set up shop in central London, in the jazzier parts of central London. The people who will benefit most from this are people in Wales, people in Scotland, people in the north of England.
It's a bit confusing. So since they don't pay tax till they earn more than 13,000, I think is the threshold, but then they get money back if they're under 23,000. It's a bit of a giving money, taking away again, isn't it?
Well, what we want to do was create a system and a programme that was really easy to understand and really easy to administer, right? Unlike other parties, when we say we're going to do something, we're going to do it. So to make it easy for people, we will make sure that money is paid directly into people's bank accounts. I'd also say this, hopefully we'll get more than 10,000 of these cards issued each year. For context, if you look at this population that we're talking about, this sort of non-dom population, that was at around 140,000 in this country in 2008. Within 15 years, that has fallen to below 70,000. So we think it could even be more than that.
Do you worry that bosses might game the system? They know that the government will come in for those paid less than 23,000, so they'll keep wages depressed, knowing that the government will make the tally up.
That's just not how markets work. If you're a boss who tries to do that, you just won't have good staff. I will say this too, this is for full-time workers. Reform is on the side of people who set their alarm clocks in the evening and rise early in the morning to go and graft. And what this also does, some of the questions from the press today were talking about incentives. Let's talk about the incentive for someone who's on benefits to actually get back and start working, because those people are probably going to start, Chris, in the bracket that we're talking about. So it's going to end up taking people off benefits, putting them into work and making work pay, which is something that hasn't been the case, frankly, in this country for decades.
We know the government's looking at reforming or changing maybe the non-dom rules. We hear that, don't we, in reports. Do you worry they might nick your idea?
Well, look, we are a party of patriots, and we've already seen, Labour flip-flopping and stealing our policies. Number one, it doesn't actually help Labour in the polls, because what it does is just show them up, show Keir Starmer up for who he is, a man with no principles, no real ideas of his own, who's just obsessed with power for its own sake. But look, we're patriots. This country has so many problems. Everyone watching this programme knows that, look, this is a great policy. It isn't a silver bullet for turning the great country around. If you want that, you need to vote for reform and get Nigel in as Prime Minister.
And just finally, are you enjoying the Doge unit? That's your new role after you quit as chairman?
I love it. We're going around the country, we're going into these councils, and it's really easy to see just how much taxpayers' money is wasted. But there's a silver lining to that. You shouldn't be depressed about all of this waste in many ways, because what it means is there's so much There's so much fat and waste to cut. We can make these councils, to start with council, because that's where we're in control, much, much more efficient. And you better be darn sure when Reform is in government and Nigel's the Prime Minister, Reform will spend taxpayers' money the way that they would spend their
When are
own.
we going to see your party arrange actual shadow cabinet roles, actual positions? We only have one leader, don't we, to look at, one deputy leader, and it's Richard Tice, one chief whip, Lee Anderson. No one else has actual jobs that looks like a government.
Yeah, well, look, we're a few years away from the general election. We've got incredible people joining the party. A lady called Layla Cunningham just defected today, a formidable prosecutor, a brilliant woman. So we've got incredible talent joining the party. You will start to see that take shape over the coming months.
Zia Youssef, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
There you have it, Zia Youssef. Now, not all parties agree with what he did there. Of course, the Tories say it's fantasy economics, and Labour also are trying to pick holes in the policy. But it looks like there's some movement, I think, on this policy of non-DOMs. We'll be seeing something shortly, I imagine, from the government too.
All right, that's Chris Hope with Zia Youssef, the Reform Party head of Doge. I was just about to call him party chairman, but that would be a mistake, of course, because he isn't. Now, we've got in the studio the other Mark White, our favourite Mark White. Just where are we now?
Don't tell Mark Francois.
Yeah, no, we love Mark Francois too. Prime Minister still... Francois is making the point the government is still not saying they specifically back what happened.
No, they're straddling a difficult one here, aren't they? You know, while saying that Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon.
Is there any one way to stop that?
Yeah, they just haven't come out and said that we agree with the military action, but they're still repeating the old mantra that we need de-escalation. Well, there's no sign of that, I have to say, in either Israel or Iran this morning. Successive waves of ballistic missiles launched by Iran at Israel that's caused some damage. We think at least 25 ballistic missiles has come over. You can see some of the damage. That's relatively minor compared to what we've seen in recent days. There was a strike, and we will bring you next hour the most remarkable video of... Oh, we got it there. Well done for getting that up quickly. Look at that. That is Ashdod, which is just south of Tel Aviv. We believe that ballistic missile was aimed towards the main power plant in Ashdod. An absolutely huge explosion
but it missed.
From that ballistic missile. Well, I'm not sure it did miss. It got something because there was power disruption in southern Israel for a couple of hours this morning. We're told that power has been restored to that area. And interestingly, following these strikes, this is Iran now, very significant strikes on the capital, Tehran, power out after power distribution nodes were struck apparently in northern Tehran. So power out in northern Tehran. And we've just got this breaking line through about another strike, apparently on the Fordo nuclear plant. Now, this was the deep nuclear plant under that mountain.
The one that Trump said was obliterated. Absolutely.
That was struck by the US just yesterday, along with two other nuclear complexes at Natanz and Isfahan. Well, Fordo was the one that required those huge bunker-busting bombs. But Israel is apparently, according to Iranian media, who are reporting what the local crisis management centre is saying, Israel has been back in there today and bombing it this morning.
Finishing off the job.
Well, it certainly looks as though they felt that there were some elements of that structure that needed a bit further attention.
So not as obliterated, perhaps, as Trump hoped.
Well, it was interesting that he said that after a battle damage assessment hadn't actually been made. Yeah. And it's difficult to know how they would be able to make an assessment deep underground because it's buried so deeply. They might be just happy with actually doing what they certainly did, which was to obliterate the kind of entrances and exits to that underground facility. That also renders that facility unusable.
Absolutely.
OK, Mark, you'll be back later. We do want to reflect what this might mean for this country as well. Crucially, what might it mean for you and us here? Now, remember your time at school, maths, science, English. Well, this week, pupils are being encouraged to celebrate diversity. It's Pride Week. Should you be encouraged? Should these children be encouraged to take pride in their sexual choices? Because that's effectively...
They're 5 years old, for heaven's sake.
This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
to know what's really going on in the corridors of power. Labour don't know what to do with you half the time, and that makes you quite lethal in the chamber. Get behind the headlines with Chopper's Political Podcast. Join me, Christopher Hope, as I sit down with the great and the good of British politics. We'll see where this ruling takes us. These are the stories shaping our nation. Chopper's Political Podcast, available now on all platforms. Listen in and stay ahead.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
You have a very nice accent, and I always thought but obviously I'm totally wrong. I've learned something already straight away.
I mean, we've interviewed together on countless occasions. I thought you would have picked up on my English accent.
Oh no, you're just changing it now. You're changing it a bit here.
Yeah, I'm just putting it on for you, mate.
Well, I'll tell you this, Chesney. I think it's amazing that we're talking about a tour next March for a man like you, and that shows you the extent to which you have to be organised to do these things. I thought like you're advertising this for this month or next month. Why the need to go so early?
Oh no, it's just to give people plenty of advance notice. You know, these days life comes up very fast, doesn't it? So I'm always touring, Eamon. I've actually got some headline shows coming up next week. I'm in Cardiff and and Southampton, but we've just announced this headline tour for next year. So I thought I'd get it out there and let people know in advance. You know.
And Chesney, just looking at your Instagram now, I mean, you've got a sense of humour, haven't you? Because you've been putting videos out there saying people think I'm a one-hit wonder, but let me tell you, there'll be a lot more songs than just the one that you're most famous for.
Yes. Contrary to popular belief, there are other songs. So looking forward, I've got a new album out right now, Ellie, and it's all been very, very well received. I'm so honoured and grateful for that. And so, yeah, I'll be performing some of this new album out on the road soon. You guys should come.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Exciting news. Every Friday, my Patrick Christie's Tonight Show is going to have a twist to it. We're welcoming some special guests. You. That's right, on Fridays, I'm going to be doing my show in front of a live studio audience because this show is about you and what you have to say. It's going to be the same big debates, same big topics, same big opinions. But every Friday night at 9 p.m, you are invited to come on down to Patrick Christie's Tonight to be a part of the action. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome to Britain's Newsroom. Welcome back with Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce until midday. Are we going to our panel? No, we're going to do our giveaway first of all because we're getting a lovely...
We're giving Bev away.
...show you into...
We're giving Bev away for nothing.
Well, I'm not for sale, but you could win £54,321. It's our biggest cash prize to date. It could be yours without paying any tax on it, which would be marvellous, wouldn't it? Here's Hayley Sparks with all the details.
We're here at Down Hall in Essex to enjoy the finer things in life, and it's your chance to win £54,321 in cash. It's like having an extra £1,000 in your bank account each week for a whole year, which means that you'd be able to indulge in treats whenever you wanted to. That extra cash each week could send some of those day-to-day financial stresses packing this year to enable you to sit back, relax and do nothing. Make sure you don't miss out on our biggest cash giveaway to date.
For another chance to win £54,321 cash, text cash to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB14 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 1st of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Good luck Indeed. Right, we are joined in the studio now by former Labour advisor Matthew Torbett and Head of Communications at Popular Conservatism, Annunziata Rees-Mogg in the studio. Right, where do we want to go first, guys? Should we go about this Farage announcement this morning, Matthew? Interesting policy. We've just heard Zia Youssef explaining it, that non-DOMs would pay one-off £250,000 fee, which would then literally get split between the poorest, they say people earning under £23,000 a year, which would end up being about 600 quid straight into people's bank accounts. Eye-catching? Is it style over substance? What do you make of it?
Both. I think eye-catching. I think both. Also style over substance. What Reform are essentially saying is if you're a rich foreigner, you'll get a better deal than a patriotic British worker who stayed here, paid taxes, done whatever you need to do all your life.
You don't have to be a foreigner to be a non-dom.
Huh?
You don't have to be a foreigner.
No, but you'll take their tax code, won't you?
Right.
So the likelihood is there'll be an element, you know, of your family or whatever. And I don't think that's very patriotic. You're gonna choose which country you want to pay tax in because they've got a lesser tax rate. There's a little bit of this that is slightly scaremongering, I think. I think this idea that a lot of the data where this non-doms fleeing the country is coming from is for people that have a direct financial interest, your high-end property markets.
I hear that, Matthew, but we know that the Chancellor is now thinking of rowing back on her own reform to non-doms because it's led to too many millionaires leaving the country. So the extra revenue she thought she'd get, it's the old Laffer curve argument, isn't it? Yeah. In fact, more money's leaving. So I'm not sure that it is just propaganda. I think it's a fact. They are leaving.
I'm surprised then, because we saw what happened under George Osborne when he changed the non-dom rules, and what you saw is there was a brief sort of exile of people who left, and then it flatlined, because there's a difference between wealthy people, essentially non-doms ordinarily, who are just wadded. They don't pay any tax. They've got loads of money. They don't work. They just sit there. You know, the people that will struggle, Mayfair restaurants, people that do awful, rich, garish clothes around Soho and whatever else, that's who will struggle in this climate. The other type, your bankers, for instance, a banker on 600 grand a year will pay about 250 grand a year in tax. Because we have some of the best financial services in the world, you're also less likely to leave. They're the people you want to keep happy from a fiscal point of view, not those who are just bloviating, the economies of Mayfair and Soho without actually really giving anything back to the country.
They give back to the country by paying a disproportionately huge amount of our tax take. And that makes a big difference to our public services.
They don't work. That's my point. There's a different type of wealthy person.
Whether they work or not, they have assets in this country that create money. They employ people in this country, and it all goes back into the greater economy. By them leaving, we lose out. They cost us nothing, and they give us a lot. We have seen that they are leaving in their thousands. It's one every 45 minutes has been going. And our tax take, as you say, because of the Laffer curve, we've gone over the level at which you keep raising money. We are now actively losing money because it's too high. The problem with the reform policy is that I don't see what these millionaires get in return. That you pay $250,000 in order to pay all the immense taxes you would have had to have paid anyway,
it's not every year.
Which are higher than the rest of the world.
It's a one-off payment for which lasts 10 years.
10 years, absolutely. So it's 25 grand a year, essentially.
And weren't they paying 30,000 a year before? So in a sense, it's cheaper.
Well, you know what
than the old Tory policy.
They get non-dom status.
Yeah,
that's exactly what.
The old Tory policy did reduce the number of people we had here anyway, and didn't net raise money. It wasn't a good policy.
Right.
Copying it doesn't make it any better. But at the other end, you've got people that they are promising £600 to. I really worry about that, because what they've actually said is that it will be for people in full-time jobs on £23,000 a year or less. Well, if you're working 37.5 hours a week, a standard full-time job, that's £11.79 an hour, which is below the minimum wage. Well, that's illegal. So who are they actually planning to support? Does this policy actually hang together? I think the details are not there, and it's also very socialist, that it's social engineering. Not only is it going to the North Wales and Scotland, but it will be protecting employers who don't pay enough to their workers by giving a state subsidy.
Just push back on two things. If they have assets in this country, I'd be astounded. Anyone that's got any sort of tax arrangements like that will likely have their assets elsewhere because they'll pay less tax. The study I cited that came out last month on what happened when George Osborne put through his non-dom changes actually showed those that pay the least tax, those that have money here rather than earn money here, were the ones most likely to leave. So I don't think they do give the most amount to our coffers, if I'm honest.
I'm afraid we have to leave it there, you two, but you will be back for more.
You will be back. We're going to see your puppies in the next... in the next set.
She's got quite a lot of them.
She's looking a bit weary and in this morning.
Good reason.
She's got a lot of puppies. Right, still to come. Should Palestine Action be prescribed as terrorists, or should they have already been prescribed as terrorists after damaging the RAF at Brighton?
Isn't the more important question, shouldn't somebody be sacked for allowing it to happen?
I agree.
Astonishing.
First, though, here is your 60-second news update with Tatiana Sanchez.
Bev, thank you very much. The headlines at 10:30. President Trump has held bullseye strikes on Iran as he calls for a regime change and says it's time to make Iran great again. That's as the US struck 3 key nuclear sites in Iran. Here's the US Defense Secretary.
As the chairman of the Joint Chiefs will demonstrate, it was an incredible and overwhelming success.
Elsewhere, lowering energy costs for thousands of businesses by scrapping green levies will form a central part of the government's new 10-year industrial strategy. The plan's to be unveiled today. A man's been charged with the murder of Annabelle Rook, found fatally stabbed after a gas explosion at her home in North London. A West Yorkshire police officer, Charlie Mitchell, who'd been reported missing, has been found dead. And the mass rollout of weight loss jabs on the NHS in England will begin today as GPs are allowed to prescribe the drugs for the very first time. Those are the latest headlines for now. More news at the top of the hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Well, it's Diversity Week in our primary schools this week, apparently.
That's
Why?
right.
Why?
We'll find out in just a minute. It's Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
I think there's a real culture shift when you leave the forces, which some people really struggle with. Not all do, many don't. You know, of those 2.1 million, not everybody's struggling with loneliness and isolation. But those that do really struggle to find their way, and then you get in that spiral.
They've been institutionalised, they've been in a with other men or other women for many years.
So you've lived in that community, you've felt valued, you've had purpose, you've had a great team and an identity, and then in some cases you don't. And when you lose that, some people struggle with that. And so Friday, as you saw, is an environment where you can bring that community back together again.
And it might actually be that some of the people to whom the army is an appealing option are already the kind of characters that want that security and they need that routine and stability, especially as younger men maybe. And so to have that taken away must be difficult. What more can be done, Richard, to help veterans when they do transition out of the army?
I think there's some good mechanisms in place for people to transition from all three services, Army, Navy, Air Force. But some people struggle, perhaps those who leave quickly as well. So if you leave quickly under a medical discharge or for disciplinary reason, you haven't necessarily left on your terms or within a time. If you were planning on serving 20 plus years and that's over in a flash, that's a game changer. And so you need that support network, family, friends, but also the MOD provide and also local community provides.
I was talking to one guy and I said, what's going on with your leg? And his wife said, he won't tell you. He lost his leg on duty, would not talk about it. He said, I was just doing my job. That's when it's incredibly humbling. And we saw a lot of this at VE Day. Bev and I were down at the Palace for 5.5 hours and we met some extraordinary figures. And it does, you do feel a sense of humility in their presence. And then you see some of them are sleeping rough on our streets.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Crash Law 24.
sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
Good morning. This is the latest AI travel news from gbnews.com. The A92 Tay Road Bridge is closed to double-decker vehicles due to high winds, with a speed limit of 30 miles per hour. The A44 between Langerig and Trodiralt is closed for resurfacing with diversions. Normal traffic is expected by 10:37 this morning on the M53 northbound in Cheshire West. In Suffolk, 10-minute delays are on the A12 northbound between junctions 32B and 33. And on the trains, Avanti West Coast and Cross Country report disruptions between Wolverhampton and Birmingham New Street. For more travel news, go to gbnews.com.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
Right, do you want to choose?
School Diversity Week. Love it? Hate it?
What's the point of it?
Is the point of it? Well, schools all across the country are taking part in it this week.
Your children aren't at primary school?
Yeah, but they will be taking part of it at secondary school. They just are. It's all about positive LGBTQ plus messaging. I'm not saying it shouldn't be positive.
And to be fair, this isn't a government initiative. It's a charity initiative, and it's up to schools whether they take part.
Well, is it? Because here's the thing. If they don't take part, you're going to have all those parents who have children who are possibly that way inclined, who will be ringing the school and saying, why are you not getting all the kids to wear Pride T-shirts this week? Because Oliver's gay and you all have to celebrate Oliver being gay. And the other kids in the class are going to go, we like Oliver. We don't care if he's gay. We just like him anyway. Yeah, but that's not enough. You have to all buy into this little Overton window of celebrating people having same-sex relationships.
Do 6-year-olds know if they're gay?
You tell me.
Come on.
You've probably got a better idea of that than me,
Come on. They don't.
I mean, look...
I just think we're filling up these kids' heads with stuff they don't need to know. They're too young. Let them just be children.
There was a time, of course, when this was absolutely necessary, when there was awful discrimination against people who weren't heterosexual. And that was only a matter of time. It wasn't that long ago. And you went through it.
It's horrible.
But wow, we have changed as a world, as a society. I'm sure there are still some religious schools that do not believe that it's OK to be gay. And therefore, maybe we should be introducing LGBTQ into those. But anyway...
Let's discuss this now, because joining us is head teacher Serge Kafai and political commentator Iman Aitan. Serge, if you were running a primary school, would you be running Diversity Week this week?
Sorry.
Have you got us? Can you hear us?
I can hear you, yeah.
Yeah, I'm just saying, Serge, if you were head teacher for primary school this week, would you be hosting Diversity Week?
Well, I'm glad you brought this subject up of what actually gets taught in our schools. First of all, I'd ask exactly what is being taught, why, to whom, and by whom. I don't think these questions are asked often enough because people running scared of perhaps being labelled as something they're perhaps not. So I'd have all those questions answered and very clear in my head before I said yes to anything being taught to my kids.
Well, I can give you a little bit of an insight into it. It's going to be a range of activities from Rainbow Friday dress-up days to LGBT plus inclusive lessons and activities, assemblies and school talks from this organisation called Just Like Us. Iman, do we need this in schools?
Yes. So Just Like Us found recently in a survey that 76% of pupils have heard homophobic slurs in school via their peers. So the evidence is there. And so what these kind of initiatives are about in terms of Diversity Week is about promoting awareness and understanding, and of course, tolerance, empathy and respect. So these are the things that are pivotal, and that's why it needs to be done, just in a way to ensure that we are preventing discrimination in the playground and in school, and then also just ensuring that we can kind of protect people in terms of mental health and self-esteem issues.
So that's just about policing language in the playground. I find that a little sinister.
Or would you prefer them to go around saying homophobic slurs?
I don't. I find that statistic from these people, Just Like Us, of 76% of kids having heard homophobic slurs. I find that a little implausible in 2025, to be honest, with having raised 3 children?
Well, I appreciate that that's how you feel, but the evidence says otherwise. So we just have to kind of put aside our feelings and just kind of accept when evidence is there, unless you're saying that Just Like Us and the recent survey that they're referring to is a complete lie. And of course, at that point, we do have to address it with Just Like Us. But what I will say, I do want to just highlight one more point, which is I grew up, and I appreciate that it was many years ago, but I remember being in school and I remember little boys being teased for the fact that they wanted to play with dolls as opposed to trucks. And I remember laughing. And I remember we all laughed, and we didn't quite understand why we laughed, and we didn't quite understand why we thought it was wrong, but we laughed nevertheless. And I remember thinking how lovely, in hindsight, right? How lovely it would have been if a teacher had come along and said, not just that's wrong, that's bullying, but if they had explained that it's okay for you as a boy, if you want to play with dolls, it's okay. If you are a female, a girl, and you want to play with trucks, it's okay. There's nothing wrong with you.
That has nothing to do with who you want to have sex with.
Hold on a second.
That is nothing to do with who you want to sleep with.
Allow me to finish. But you're conflating two things. But I'll just finish my point and I'll address yours. Ultimately, it comes down to it would have helped me in terms of my understanding as to why I was actually being a bully and teasing and mocking someone, how and why. And then secondly, it would have really helped with the self-esteem and mental health of the individual that was being mocked, instead of them carrying that baggage until they're 45 years old and then paying a therapist for 45 worth of sessions to talk about they were bullied when they were 7. It really does help in terms of preventative measures for discrimination now and discrimination later. Now, to address your point, Bev, when you speak about it doesn't necessarily address sexuality or sexual. That's what you're referring to, and I think we need to just remember it's two different things.
Go on,
We're talking about puberty.
Can I just pop in here?
Let's surge in, Iman.
Go
on,
when we start talking about sexual things.
You know, these very clever arguments forget to take on board who we're talking about. Young children here. Okay, it's a very nuanced argument that they can wait till they get to puberty and a little bit later on. If they're being rude, if they're being nasty to one another, which children will be, let's deal with it properly. You don't need a diversity week in order to deal with such problems. And quite frankly, some of this, and we've already got enough issues with social media, some of these issues being brought to bear to our children far too young. We're the adults in the room. Let's take some responsibility here. There's a time and a place for everything. And if it's something's being done that's inappropriate, let's deal with it there and then in an appropriate manner. They're far too young to be faced with the inevitable questions that will come when they're faced with this sort of week. I'd far rather the time be spent on the curriculum, teaching life skills, things like first aid, basic economics, politics. Schools are supposed to be mainly about facts. And let's make sure that professionals are able to deal with it too. It's not about just who you're teaching it to, but by whom. People might well have their own agendas and pushing it far too young for these kids to be able to process it properly in the way that the young lady is quite rightly expressing.
Puberty, I just say, puberty is between the ages of 8 and 14 typically. That is the truth. And so we're talking from year 4 onwards. So I appreciate where we can kind of go awry in terms of the conversation, because we are conflating kind of sexual feelings with the understanding of one's body and who we are and who we fancy and who we have a crush on. And we're not, remember, during puberty, this is what happens. You get your crush. You get the first time when you think about maybe kissing a boy or a girl or someone else. You get a greater desire to maybe want to have a romantic relationship. So maybe you say, Mum, I've got a boyfriend at school, right?
The primary schools don't start age 8.
From 8 to 14. So to not
primary schools don't start age 8,
it means that you're steering them wrong, because they have a lack of information, which means that they will end up being
they have a lack of maturity to be able to comprehend what we're talking about here.
And not realise.
They have a lack of maturity to be able to understand this stuff, which means it's going to lead to more confusion. And, you know, the idea that you bring certain things to bear with children too early is not only does it confuse them more, but actually they'll start thinking of things that they've never thought of before.
Yeah.
The trans argument is a simple one that I hope has been scotched now. You know, don't tell me that youngsters...
I asked you a question. What's too early, sir? You said it's too early.
Well, it depends on the individual. You see, when you've been in teaching as long as I have, you realise that children mature at different stages and very differently. Okay, so
between the ages,
therefore,
typically, in terms of puberty, 8 to 14, it can range.
No,
and so it's quite...
puberty at 8 is very unusual.
Very, very unusual. Listen, I'm sorry both, we've run out of time. We do need to move on, but obviously a really controversial issue.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for your contributions, Serge, Safai and Iman Aitan there. The more I look at the information about this Just Like Us thing, I find it weird.
Of course it is.
Why are adults preoccupied with making children think about sex?
Why can't they just have a history week?
Right, if you search some holiday sun, you might be. Here are our top European destinations.
I forecast a perfect holiday in the sun.
Weather looking good then?
For sure, and no worries about our travel insurance.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations forecast.
Following a peak in the temperatures across the western Mediterranean in the last few days, it is now turning fresher. There are a few showers to watch out for, particularly across areas of Iberia. Generally, though, further east, it's high pressure in charge, and that's allowing the heat to also transfer eastwards. Particularly parts of northern Italy into the Balkans will see those temperatures climbing. But the high pressure also means there'll be plentiful amounts of sunshine for these regions right throughout the week.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations forecast.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
No,
Because the failure is...
You're
the failure
deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Jubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
What is the state of our economy? What is the state of our National Health Service? What is the state of our schools?
What on earth is going on?
Understanding Britain means understanding the state we are in. This is State of the Nation with me, Matt Goodwin, Wednesdays, Thursdays and Fridays from 8 p.m. on GB News.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK.
We're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
He can say whatever he wants.
A straight-talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m, weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
At GB News, we love to hear from you, our viewers and listeners. So drop us a line at gbnews.com/your say. There you can talk to each other and also to the presenters live on air. gbnews.com/your say. Because GB News is your channel, Britain's news channel. Welcome. Back to Britain's Newsroom. 10:50, Andrew and Bev. On a lovely Monday morning. Did you have a nice sunny weekend? Did you have a nice sunny weekend?
Yeah, I did. I interviewed Sarah Vine about her book about...
Oh, yes, you were going off to do that. Was it a
lovely.
success?
Stunning house in Leicestershire, owned by David Ross, who founded Carphone Warehouse.
You
There was a book
mix
festival.
with the rich.
It was a festival, music and book festival.
Get in touch with us this morning, won't you? GBNews.com/yours. Let us know if you had a lovely sunny weekend. Now, opening statements take place in the independent inquiry into the 1998 Omagh bombing today. It was the single deadliest atrocity of the Troubles in which 29 people were killed.
GB News Northern Ireland reporter Doogie Beattie joins us now. Doogie, morning to you. Can you just explain to me, I remember covering that bombing at the time, and I always recall being revulsed that a woman who was pregnant with twins was among the people who died. But why now are we having this inquiry about could it have been prevented when it happened nearly 30 years ago?
Well, this is it. This inquiry never took place. In fact, the families had to fight for this inquiry quite hard indeed, and it was Chris Heaton-Harris that eventually granted them an inquiry. But that inquiry was not about who done it. It was about could it have been prevented. And of course, the bomb that came here travelled from the Republic of Ireland, and the Republic of Ireland are not involved in this statutory inquiry. Now, as you've said, there is actually 31 people, if you take in those twins, that died here on the 15th of August 1998. And you've got to remember that the Good Friday Agreement was signed in Good Friday 1998. So it was sometime after that that this actually happened. And what they're trying to find out, did the security forces know that this bomb was coming? Were they told to not look too hard into Republican activity at that stage? And did it actually cause the loss of life here of innocents, tourists, and everyone else that was here? I mean, I was here at that stage. It quite upset me at that time. And in fact, I've said it many times now before, my own son was born 2 days later, and I did wonder what sort of world I was bringing them into, because what we witnessed was absolutely horrendous here. But this inquiry is now at its second stage. It opened last year. We heard from the families, we heard from first responders, we heard from survivors of that horrendous attack. And now what we are seeing is Lord Turnbull setting out the terms of this inquiry. So it's really now that we will start to hear from the PSNI, the police force that's here now. We will then hear from the Secretary of State's legal representation, and we will also hear from Sir Ronnie Flanagan, the ex-Chief Constable of the RUC. But what people want to know here is, could it have been prevented, and was it political that they didn't want this looked at too hard?
Fascinating. Doogie Beattie, our Northern Ireland correspondent, reporter. Amazing. Thank you very much for that. If the security service was allowed to have turned a blind eye, wow.
Yeah.
It really was the worst bombing atrocity by the IRA. Extraordinary.
Right, still to come. Have you noticed that increase in petrol prices at the forecourt this morning already? We will tell you why Brits have been warned that the cost at the pump might skyrocket even more.
This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News. Here's your weather.
Even though we'll see a cloudy start, it'll be a bright outlook for the rest of the day. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, a very good morning to you. This is your GB News weather update provided by the Met Office. It's a bright and breezy start to the week. We've got low pressure sets just to the north of the UK. Quite a lot of isobars on the chart though means some quite blustery winds are coming in from the west, and a few frontal systems could bring some longer spells of rain to the Northern Isles, where we may see gale strength gusts for a time. A scattering of other showers will be pushing in from the northwest. Those to the east of higher ground, though, may manage to stay largely dry. And particularly for the southern half of the UK, will stay largely fine and settled here, with a decent number of sunny spells over the course of the day. Do remember, though, in that sunshine, UV levels will be high since we are just past the summer solstice. Temperatures in the southeast peaking at around 24 degrees Celsius, so fairly pleasant if you're out of the breeze. It will be that little bit fresher and a little cooler up towards the north, generally around mid to high teens here. As we move into the latter stages of the day, we are going to see the cloud build in more readily across western areas, initially across Northern Ireland, but then across other regions as we see these spells of longer rain gradually pushing their way in. Some stronger winds as well developing around this system. The heaviest of the rain likely across some western hills, but we're also starting to see a southwesterly wind, and so we'll see some more humid conditions to start off Tuesday morning across the south and west. It will be that little bit fresher up towards the north. But generally things will continue to push their way eastwards throughout the day. Again, the rain always heaviest out towards the west. Some areas in the east may manage to stay dry, but a lot more cloud around on Tuesday nonetheless. And in that southwesterly theme, temperatures could just knock up that little bit more, now around 26 degrees Celsius in the south and east, 18 there for Edinburgh and Stonehaven. During the rest of this week, it is going to remain fairly changeable, so expect further showers and rain at times, maybe even a few thunderstorms.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
We're kick-starting summer with your chance to win our biggest cash prize to date, as there's an incredible £54,321 in tax-free cash to be won. What would you spend it on? A brand new car, the holiday of a lifetime, or just sit back, relax and remove some of those day-to-day financial stresses? For another chance to win, text cash to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB14 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 1st of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation,
Because
the failure is...
You're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Jubes & Co weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK.
We're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
At GB News, we love to hear from you, our viewers and listeners. So drop us a line at gbnews.com/yoursay. There, you can talk to each other and also to the presenters live on air. gbnews.com/yoursay, because GB News is your channel, Britain's news channel.
What is the state of our economy? What is the state of our National Health Service? What is the state of our schools?
What on earth is going on?
Understanding Britain means understanding the state we are in. This is State of the Nation with me, Matt Goodwin, Wednesdays, Thursdays and Fridays from 8 p.m. on GB News.
Morning, it's 11 a.m. on Monday the 23rd of June, live across the UK, Britain's Newsroom with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
Thank you very much for joining us. So, Iran has vowed revenge.
Reassure the British public that we're doing everything we can to stabilise the situation, to de-escalate the situation and to get to a negotiated outcome.
Terror fears in Britain as Iran pledges payback on the United States and its allies.
Well, just a day after the US struck the Fordo nuclear complex in Iran, reports suggest that Israel has returned to continue bombing that site.
And political protest. Palestine Action is mounting a rally in central London soon as the Home Secretary is poised to label the movement a terrorist group. This is just 3 days after the damaged planes at the RAF base in Brighton Alton.
And the Reform UK leader Nigel Farage has pledged a major tax shake-up and would charge non-DOMs £250,000. The proceeds would go to people working who are among our less well-off.
They say, why do we bother? Because the people next door do nothing, and they're pretty much as well off as we are.
Maternity scandal. Health Secretary Wes Streeting has announced a national investigation into the state of maternity care, as he says it's clear that something is going wrong.
And we love this story. A Just Eat delivery driver came to the rescue of dozens of passengers stranded on a train on Saturday in sweltering heat. He literally threw up dozens of bottles of water.
And did you see the BBC News reader Martine Crossall correct the autocue over the weekend? She looks utterly fed up with the BBC's gender-neutral language. Have a listen.
Malcolm Mystery, who was involved in the research, says that the aged, pregnant people, women, and those with pre-existing health conditions need to take precautions.
Wonder how much trouble she's in.
Yeah, probably quite a lot, but good for her. We like her.
On the radio, there was a very pointy, sort of slight eye roll.
There certainly was. Only the BBC think you'd have pregnant people.
And also, can I just say that Wes Streeting inquiry into maternity services, Baroness Cumberledge, Julia Cumberledge, did a brilliant report only a few years ago that cost a lot of money and took a lot of time. Here we go, Wes Streeting. Have a look at that. Because nothing's really changed. Nothing was implemented that Baroness Cumberledge recommended, and all the same problems remain. I've just saved you a ton of money and a ton of time. GBNews.com /your say to get involved this morning. First though, Tatiana Sanchez with your news.
Bev, thank you. The top stories. The Israeli Defense Forces have said more missiles have been launched from Iran towards Israel. Approximately 15 Iranian missiles were launched in the latest wave of attacks, and shrapnel has landed in several locations after they were intercepted, according to reports. That's as President Trump has hailed bullseye strikes on Iran as he calls for a regime change and says it's time to make Iran great again. It comes in the aftermath of the US striking 3 key nuclear sites in Iran. Fears grow as experts warn nuclear material could have been moved ahead of the Operation Midnight Hammer. It comes as satellite images reveal Iran's Fordo nuclear site was severely damaged. It's unclear as to whether it was completely destroyed. Iran's supreme leader broke his silence in reaction to the strikes yesterday on X, stating the enemy had made a grave mistake. Sir Keir Starmer's warned there's a risk of the Middle East crisis spiralling beyond the region. Downing Street says the US president and Sir Keir agreed Tehran must not be allowed to develop a nuclear weapon and called for Iran to return to negotiations. Shadow Defence Secretary James Cartledge spoke to GB News.
Just not clear what he actually thinks of the attacks. If you look at the language, he's talking about, recognising the action has happened, that he's spoken to the president. Does he actually support the actual military action? Because let's be clear, lots of people say, lots of politicians in this country, lots of our allies, quite rightly, and it's important that they do. They recognise that Iran can't be allowed to have a military nuclear program, but at the same time, it's not clear what the action is that they would take to deal with that.
The Metropolitan Police Chief says he's shocked and frustrated at a planned protest in support of Palestine Action in London today. Commissioner Sir Mark Rowley said while the right to protest is essential, actions in support of such a group go beyond what most would see as a legitimate protest. It comes as the Home Secretary is understood to be preparing a written statement to put before Parliament today to prescribe the group, effectively branding it a terrorist organisation. On Friday, Palestine Action activists broke into RAF Bryce Norton in Oxfordshire and sprayed 2 military planes with red paint in protest of the UK's support of Israel over the war in Gaza. At least 22 people have been killed after a suicide bomber opened fire at a church in Syria and then detonated an explosive vest. This is the first such incident since Bashar al-Assad was toppled in December, and officials claim the attacker was a member of the Islamic State terror group. It happened at a Greek Orthodox church in Damascus, with estimates suggesting that 350 worshippers were praying there at the time. Witnesses said the perpetrator had his face covered when he began shooting and blew himself up as crowds attempted to remove him from the building. Elsewhere, lowering energy costs for thousands of businesses by scrapping green levies will form a central part of the government's new 10-year industrial strategy. The plan, which may slash energy bills by up to 25% for more than 7,000 UK businesses, is set to be unveiled today alongside other measures hoped to boost growth. Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer called the industrial strategy a turning point for Britain's economy by supporting key industries where there is potential for growth. Acting Shadow Energy Secretary Andrew Bowie criticised the plans, saying the UK needed a serious approach to energy policy that tackles the root cause of our high energy prices. A man has been charged with the murder of a woman found fatally stabbed after a gas explosion at her home in North London. 44-year-old Clifton George was also charged with arson with intent to endanger life after 36-year-old Annabelle Rook was found fatally injured in Stoke Newington just before 5 a.m. last Tuesday. Mr. George, who was found with slash injuries, is due to appear in court today. Elsewhere, a West Yorkshire police officer who'd been reported missing has now been found dead, the force has confirmed. Charlie Mitchell, a 26-year-old patrol officer from Halifax, was reported missing from his home in Leeds on Saturday. West Yorkshire police said officers searching St Aidan's Nature Reserve near Leeds found his body around 5:30 yesterday afternoon. His death is not being treated as suspicious. And the mass rollout of weight loss jabs on the NHS in England will begin today as GPs are allowed to prescribe the drugs for the first time. Around 220,000 people with greatest need are expected to receive Mounjaro through the NHS over the next 3 years. It's an anti-diabetic drug which lowers blood sugar levels and slows down how quickly food is digested. From today, GPs in England will be allowed to prescribe Mounjaro to severely obese people who also suffer from a range of other health problems. The medicine makes you feel fuller so you can eat less. In clinical trials, people taking it lost 20% of their body weight. Those are the latest headlines for now. More news in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Done.
My Claim Group sponsors the GB News Finance Report.
And here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.3402 and €1.1684 euros. The price of gold is £2,511 and 96 pence per ounce. And the FTSE 100 is at 8,779 points. Done.
My Claim Group sponsors the GB News Finance Report.
Welcome back to Britain's Newsroom with Andrew and Bev. Thank you so much for joining us on this Monday morning. Should we see what you've been talking about at home, shall we? Here we go. Right. You didn't like Iman on our debate about Diversity Week. I'm afraid you weren't happy to hear her strong opinions on that and talking over the other person. So we do apologise, but she does make some very strong arguments. Right. Did I catch that right? We are spending money to do an inquiry that was already done, and the British people had to push 20 years for an inquiry into the grooming gang. Sounds to me like criminals in Parliament are protecting criminal behaviour as they engage in criminal behaviour. That's presumably in relation to Northern Ireland.
Yeah. That is extraordinary that they're doing the inquiry now.
Yeah.
1998, nearly 30 years ago.
Absolutely. Sorry, just hold the line, caller. I'm just reloading the messages. If you do want to talk to us, you can obviously do so on here. Oh, sorry, it's not working. Let's go to Mark White. He's with us. I'm sorry, I can't.
There's a lot happening. We were talking earlier, Mark, to Mark Francois, I think you were in the studio, about the extraordinary security breach at Brize Norton. Shouldn't it be bristling with security, which enabled two of these ridiculous pro-Palestine protesters who are going to be prescribed as a terrorist organisation? I think they were on e-scooters.
Yeah, they were.
And nobody's been caught?
Not as yet, as far as we know.
And they've inflicted £25 million of damage?
Obviously, when they came in and then escaped undetected. I mean, it is incredible to think that a military base, the UK's biggest, busiest RAF base, the home of these vital assets, transportation and refuelling aircraft, should be the subject of such a security breach. And what was a sabotage operation. You know, it's been called vandalism by the government, but it was sabotage on these multi-million-pound aircraft, engines that will be a write-off now, that will have to be, I don't even think they can be stripped back and cleaned, and will need to be replaced at a very significant cost. And given where we are in terms of the war in Ukraine and the activities that this government has said the Russian state has been involved in. And now, of course, after October 7th and everything that has been happening with the Iranian state, with terror plots here linked to them, with what we saw, of course, in Cyprus over the weekend with an individual arrested on suspicion of planning a plot targeting the Akrotiri RAF base there. It's incredible to think that these people were able to get through the perimeter fence at this busy airfield and not just get through, but actually commit that act of sabotage and then escape
and just saunter off
undetected.
I suppose what's even more remarkable in a way, Mark, is that we haven't needed security at Brize Norton until now. These planes have been able to sit there, presumably for decades, and there hasn't been a risk on this soil. And now we've imported the conflict in the Middle East. These are Palestinian protesters. I hate the fact that we might have to change something as fundamental as security in an RAF base because of that.
Yeah, but I think we are, because this group and others, you know, others linked to Russia, for instance, have been involved in attacks that have taken place, going after defence contractors, going after contractors on Russia's part that have been linked to Ukraine. So there's definitely a heightened risk out there, without a doubt. And we are, I think, going to have to factor that in. Now, you're right. There's probably been, I wouldn't say complacency, but perhaps the actual security around these military bases does need to be enhanced quite significantly, because you have at the moment a sort of a mix of the Ministry of Defence, police, own on-site military personnel who tend to be at the gatehouses, but then private contractors as well. It's certainly a time to review that.
And the Home Secretary today, Yvette Cooper, is going to announce that she's prescribing this group as a terrorist organisation. What does that really mean, Mark, and why is she doing that?
Well, on the most practical level, it means that it cuts off support for these groups, because if you are seen to be supporting this group in any way, then you are guilty of an offence under the Terrorism Act that then carries with it a very significant penalty, probability of actually time in jail. So those that are supporting and funding this particular organisation will then be the subject of potential prosecution. So it will have an impact on this group. But it's possible that this group will disperse and then reinvent itself under another name. We saw this with Al-Muhajirun, the group that was linked to the Islamist preacher Anjem Chowdhury, that was proscribed and then sort of reinvented itself under a number of guises. The authorities got wise to that, though, and effectively brought charges against them, saying, look, this is effectively the same organisation, you've just called it another name. So if Palestine Action tried to do that, I'm sure there will be a response from government that will still link it to that group at the end of the day.
And is Palestine Action the organisation that we see at the weekends in the West End walking around with their Palestinian flags? Is it the same group? Because a lot of those are just sort of middle-class British do-gooders with the Waitrose carrier bags.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of rent-a-mob as well. You see them at climate change protests and alike, the same groups
giving
that have these concerns.
Meaningless lives, you might say.
Well, indeed, they come out. They're loosely affiliated, but to be honest, Palestine Action is a more militant, direct action group that is willing to go that step further and not just disrupt, but actually cause significant disruption and damage to the likes of defence contractors, or now, as we see, military installations. And according to the Metropolitan Police Commissioner were even involved in an attack on an officer with a sledgehammer. So they have gone well over the line in terms of what is acceptable in putting a political message across in a protest-wise manner.
And they're protesting outside the gates of the Houses of Parliament this morning. Extraordinary.
Well, yes, certainly there will be groups that are coming together. But what you will have, as Bev has just alluded to there, is a lot of the sort of loosely affiliated groups and the do-gooders who feel that this is actually, you know, trying to silence the voice of those who are concerned about what's happening in Gaza. Well, no. This is about trying to stop the actions of a group who are not just disrupting, but sabotaging vital military installations in this country. You can still have a voice and you can still protest about what you see as unacceptable activities of the Israeli state. And
yeah,
of course,
absolutely. Yeah. I would defend their right to protest, absolutely.
But there is a difference.
There is, and I just find it such a stupid thing to do. We aren't bombing Gaza. We are not the British people. These are not planes which are going to go out to Gaza and bomb innocent civilians.
No, and ironically, these planes have actually been used in the help to drop aid into Gaza.
Amazing.
That is my point.
That's how stupid they are. Thanks,
Mark White. Moving on now, a bit of a gear change. Great British giveaway. You could win £54,321 in our biggest cash prize to date, tax-free. Here's Hayley Sparks having a lovely time getting a massage with all your details.
We're here at Down Hall in Essex to enjoy the finer things in life. And it's your chance to win £54,321 in cash. It's like having an extra £1,000 in your bank account each week for a whole year, which means that you'd be able to indulge in treats whenever you wanted to. That extra cash each week could send some of those day-to-day financial stresses packing this year to enable you to sit back, relax and do nothing. Make sure you don't miss out on our biggest cash giveaway to date.
For another chance to win £54,321 cash, text cash to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message. Or text bonus to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB14 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 1st of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Good luck. Enter now. Win that money. What a lovely summer you'd have now.
You really would.
Up next, around 220,000 people with greatest need, that's the quote, are expected to receive Mounjaro, a fat jab.
Over the next 3 years, and it means for the first time, NHS GPs are going to be able to prescribe it. But we're saying, what about the some known side effects? You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
He can say whatever he wants.
A straight-talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m, weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Welcome to Dunkirk. Yes, this was was described as our darkest hour. And of course, it was British expeditionary forces that had to get lifted off the beaches. And the real problem was that the big naval ships couldn't get in close enough. So these little small boats that you see, 933 of them, were called up, and they managed to evacuate most of the troops out of there over that week period. And unfortunately, out of those 933 small boats, unfortunately only 697 of them returned. The majority of those that were wrecked at that stage were under enemy fire, and every big anniversary, these small ships return to Dunkirk to educate, to remember, and then to sail back to Britain. And there has been so much interest here in Dunkirk and these small ships.
How important is it that we remember Dunkirk?
Incredibly important. 85 years ago, there were 250,000 troops on the beach up there, another 25,000 in the rear guard. None of them knowing whether they were going to live or die, or whether they were going to be rescued, or even if they could be rescued. And based upon what's happening today, we need to remember what happened then, and commemorate that, and celebrate the fact that we still are aware of it, and these boats exist as well. So it's just so important to us.
Lots of these little boats back in the day were only brand new, and the Admiralty just took them away and used them. Yeah. And the men that were on them didn't necessarily own them, and there was quite a few of them destroyed.
There were 240 of them destroyed over that whole period.
GB News, the People's Channel.
At GB News, we are proud to stand for you, for the Britain you love, for the communities you live in. That's what makes us the fearless champions of Britain. Its voices and its values. Because we, at GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Britain's Newsroom. We are with you until midday, and we've got Annunciata Rees-Mogg and Matthew Talbot in the studio with us this morning.
Now, we may be teetering on the edge of World War III, but we do want to share. We want you to share something with us.
I did trail that you'd get to see Annunciata's puppies in this section.
How many?
Last Wednesday, our wonderful, lovely dog had 6 puppies.
Should we have a little look at the picture? If you're listening on the radio, this may not work, but Annunciata, what are they?
Well, I'm not a big fan of pedigrees because I think a lot of people have overbred them. So a friend of mine's dog met a cockapoo in the park, so half Labrador, half cockapoo is the mum, and we bred her with a cocker, so cockapoo-y labs.
Lovely, very
and
cute.
You're only getting 2 hours sleep because you have to...
2 hours on, 2 hours off, to make sure the mum feeds the right ones, but also doesn't squash any of them.
Right.
They are very, very small.
Oh, it's a delicate business.
Is it worse than having children?
It is. No, right. I've had gone through 3 newborns. Puppies are way, way more tiring.
There we are.
Right, Matthew,
you've been warned.
Do you want to talk about fat jabs or Iran?
Oh, God.
I know. Talk about from the sublime to the ridiculous. It's quite a news agenda at the moment.
Well, I'd like to know, what is the strategy about the Prime Minister? We want to imply that we support what America's doing, because we keep saying Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon, but we won't quite say, when asked a straight question, do you support what America did? You don't get an answer.
Because he doesn't want to get involved. But we are participants, not leaders in this sort of thing. I do think we saw a little bit of over-egging the pudding from certain MPs. I saw John Pearce, a backbencher from High Peak on Newsnight, saying Donald Trump's a pacifist, he's not going to get involved. We're forgetting him sort of carpet bombing Syria, taking out the Iran general last time in his first term. And,
I'd never call Donald Trump a pacifist.
No, quite. And I think there was this bizarre notion he just was not going to get involved. He's now got himself, I wouldn't say in a rock and a hard place, but he's essentially a neutral participant in this because the language is very neutral. He doesn't want to get involved. And I think rightfully so. I don't think we should be getting involved in any sort of protracted war. But I think I said a couple of weeks ago when this kicked off, we're involved. We are involved. We're going to follow America into this. Israel has sort of bounced Trump into it and embarrassed him a little bit.
He had to follow Israel into it.
Of course he did. So he's had to do this to try and save his own reputation of going, no, we are the leaders of this. Netanyahu's been dreaming of the US getting involved in direct conflict for
30 years.
3 decades. Yeah, exactly.
He has.
The plan, well, I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. I genuinely don't know. This could go either way. What I would say is popular opinion and public opinion tends to fall on the side of we shouldn't be getting involved.
I think there'll be a poll. The first poll will show 60-70% against.
I think completely understandably the British people always are on the side of peace, and that you talk before you act, and that's completely sensible. But we've gone past that point. That Iran has already been attacked. Today, we've had Putin come out and say he backs Iran against the unprovoked aggression of the US. We know that Iran has America and Israel, both of whom are British allies. They want to end them as states. It's not something that talks are going to end easily. I think the best thing we can hope for is that the Iranian people do overthrow this leadership, who are absolutely set on destroying the West.
But we also don't know what then takes its place.
We don't, and we've seen that in Syria, and it's incredibly worrying as to where that leads us.
They got rid of Gaddafi, and Libya's in a worse place.
Exactly. You can get worse.
Netanyahu will have dragged Britain into this, not Trump. Not Trump. I think that's when you say he's a pacifist. I think he definitely stood wanting to end wars. I think he's realised that's not quite as easy as it might have looked when he was running to be president. But I don't think he wanted... Trump doesn't want any of this. He's not bloodthirsty in the way that some of the media would like to depict him.
No, probably not.
He could have come in straight away. If he was so worried about Iran having a nuclear bomb, his first week in the office, he could have bombed Iran. He's been forced into this by Netanyahu.
Yeah, and he needs to show strength because his approval rating is about -6 at the moment. He's trying to pass the big, beautiful bill, which is causing a lot of issues, especially the cuts to Medicaid in America, and those the public opinion is not on his side for that. Do you know, I was just thinking, as Annunciata was speaking, just to segue slightly, it's hilarious in a way that we're going to see Palestinian action prescribed today as a terrorist group. But the IRGC, I was telling them...
This is the Iranian Republican Guard.
Revolutionary Guard. I spent the last 2 years of my time in Westminster working with MPs to try and ask the Foreign Secretary to prescribe this group. We were totally a terrorist group using proxies to essentially go after Jews, but other people in the West, through Hamas, through Hezbollah, through the Houthis and Palestinian Jihad and all the rest of it. And yet they are not a prescribed group. And David Lammy is still dragging his feet over the fact that they are not a prescribed group, will not prescribe them. I don't know if that will shift this week. I won't hold my breath. But you have a group totally stupid in their actions, by the way. I think silly, throw away the key, lock them up, whatever. But are primarily of non-violent means going to be prescribed this afternoon. I find that logic bizarre in a weird way. It's like looking through the other end.
And bizarrely, GB News had an interview this morning with a Labour minister who said, oh, well, of course, I can't go into the process of prescribing an organisation. It's like, well, you seem to be able to do it extremely quickly for one lot. The much more dangerous lot, on a global scale, still not prescribed. It is bizarre. But I think we've just got...
But it also makes you wonder if there's any point in it. Is it just is it a bit of gesture politics?
I think it gives the authorities more power to stop, detain, etc., lock up, which hopefully gives us a level of protection, because the whole point is that there are things going on in this country. And at that point, we've got to act.
And so I know it isn't necessarily on the list, but you're one of the few parents we've had on the panel this morning. I want to ask you about Diversity Week being about LGBTQ+ in schools.
In primary schools.
In primary schools.
Well,
is it necessary?
No. I think it's absolutely unnecessary and counterproductive that actually highlighting differences is often a really bad thing to do, that children just take everyone on face value. They could not care less. They don't notice whether you're gay, straight, black, white, none of it matters to them. They take you as a person. And by pointing out that there are differences, I think can really make things much
It's
worse.
a really good point. You've just reminded me of a conversation with one of my daughters when she was about 5 years old at school, in reception. She was trying to explain something that had happened, and she was telling me which child it was. And I was saying, which one? She said, you know, she had red shoes on, or she had a blue bag. I'm like, which child? And then when I worked out, I said, oh, the only mixed-race girl in the class. You mean, that girl?
I had the same. I've had the same two of mine.
How lovely. They don't see it.
They really don't. I had the same with mine. She had two friends called Sophia. One was Italian, one was of African origin, and she described one of them as the girl with curly hair.
Exactly.
And they both had wavy or curly hair.
And we feed this division, do we, Matt?
I think adults ruin children, yes, more broadly, I would say, and putting our ideas on them, potentially. Is there a need for a week? I'd actually say it'd be better off just having a more diverse curriculum, and if story time comes up and you're a certain age, that There's nothing wrong with being gay, and some boys kiss boys, some girls kiss girls. But honestly, as a 5-year-old,
There's nothing wrong with being gay, that's it, end of assembly, right?
But that's it, but I think... I get why people do it, and it's probably well-meaning, the idea that, you know, you can see yourself reflected in the reading that you're doing, potentially. We used to do, you know, things like Pride and Prejudice, English literature. Yeah. I just thought it was rubbish. I didn't care that it didn't reflect me, because I'd go home and watch football. That reflected me. So I think now there are many other outlets.
You know what I have a massive issue with as well is the word pride in relation to who you want to have sex with. Because you teach children, I'm very proud of you when you do this, I'm proud of this. It's like saying that your sexuality is something you should be proud of.
Yeah.
I don't like that.
I mean, I see how it came about. I assume it's a reaction to I'm not ashamed.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that makes complete sense.
Yeah.
But I think you're right, that pride is a very odd word.
Yeah.
That can have quite negative connotations.
Yeah.
I think it's historical, isn't it? I think I'm right in remembering that pride came out of a time where you were told you should be ashamed to be gay, the AIDS crisis and all the rest of it. So I think I get it from that. You've got to bring everyone else with you as well. You've got to make sure everyone feels proud.
And I think the thing is that's adults. So what message are we giving children? We're saying we'll be proud of you if you are gay. Is that what we're saying?
But shouldn't we be proud of you if you're heterosexual?
I am proud of my children, and they will make their own choices and live their own lives, and I will support them in it as long as they are good people.
And that's the majority of people, I think. I've always said the day I have kids, don't care what they are. I'll love them as much as I always have, regardless. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Right, as long as they support your football team.
Which is your football team?
Stockport.
Oh, what division are they in?
League One.
Right. I'm not much wiser.
Yeah, like you said. Maggie Talbot and Annunciata Rees-Mogg, thank you so much. Still to come, we're going to be hearing from the Reform UK leader Nigel Farage about his new plan to tax the rich and give to the poor. First of all, your 60-second news update with Tatiana.
Bev, thank you. The headlines at 11:30. President Trump has hailed bullseye strikes on Iran as he calls for a regime change and says it's time to make Iran great again. That's as the US struck 3 key nuclear sites in Iran. Here's the US Defense Secretary.
As the chairman of the Joint Chiefs will demonstrate, it was an incredible and overwhelming success.
Elsewhere, lowering energy costs for thousands of businesses by scrapping green levies will form a central part of the government's new 10-year industrial strategy that plans to be unveiled today. A man's been charged with the murder of Annabelle Rook, found fatally stabbed after a gas explosion at her home in North London. Elsewhere, a West Yorkshire police officer, Charlie Mitchell, who'd been reported missing, has now been found dead. And the mass rollout of weight loss jabs on the NHS in England will begin today as GPs are allowed to prescribe the drugs for the first time. And those are the latest headlines for now. More news at the top of the hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Tatiana.
Yes, that's our new 1 minute
I like that
bulletins.
1 minute, 60
We do.
Tatiana standing up
Punchy.
as well.
It was very punchy.
It's for a generation with an attention span that lasts barely a TikTok video.
You speak for yourself, Thomas. Now, that is Tom and Emily. What's coming up?
Well, we're going to be heading to Trafalgar Square. Our reporter Adam Cherry is there because this Palestine Action protest is planned. It'll be interesting to see just how many people turn up.
Absolutely. I mean, this is a big, big deal because ultimately there is a huge constituency of people who think they're just protesting.
Yeah.
Why is the government trying to ban protest? And then there are people with their heads screwed on properly who see that these are people who broke into into one of our most secure military bases in the country and made profound damage to 2 Voyager aircraft for the RAF. I mean, if that is protest, I don't know what...
Remember when they slashed the Balfour painting?
Yeah.
That was bad enough.
But
before you even enter a military
those planes
zone.
apparently have been used in distributing aid to people in Gaza. So they're not even using their brains, these people. But, Tom, I'm still staggered about the breach of security at that base. How is that allowed to happen? Why is there not a statement, an emergency statement in the Commons? We should be raising Cain about this.
I mean,
it's staggering.
Heads should definitely
roll,
because these people were able to get in. I've been to this site.
Yeah.
I interviewed Boris Johnson there, actually, in 2022. It's a site where not only the royals take off and land from, but also whenever Boris Johnson flew to Ukraine, he came back into Brize Norton, and on one of those occasions he landed, and I met him on the tarmac, actually got shown around the plane as well, but did a quick interview. But the number of checkpoints I had to go through to get to that runway, escorted at all times, followed at all times, secure. You can't just wander into this.
So what went wrong then? So
Something
when you
terrible.
were there, check.
And also,
At night-time, no.
they went in on their e-scooters and left on their e-scooters, and nobody apprehended them
It's absolutely
when they were
incredible,
leaving.
isn't it? And there's still, rumour that there could have been some damage done to one of these planes, serious damage.
£25 million worth.
Hundreds of,
the engine
hundreds of
failure
millions.
potentially could have been absolutely disastrous.
And also, what if they got in and nobody saw them, they put a bomb in one of the planes, full of fuel?
Well, we're going to hear from Yvette Cooper, or at least she's giving a written statement, I think it is.
Oh, is it?
On whether it's going to be prescribed. So we'll wait for that too. I imagine there'll be uproar at this rally that's taking place in Trafalgar Square. Now, it is banned from coming into Westminster,
right?
But we'll see if that actually happens. I do feel a bit for Mark Rowley.
I do think there is a debate to be had, though, because prescription is for, Al-Qaeda or ISIS. Is Palestine Action the same level? I wonder if there needs to be a new category for organisations that exist to cause illegality, but perhaps aren't that same level. They're not beheading.
They're more like Just Stop Oil, aren't they?
Yeah, exactly. Perhaps there should be a category for these groups that exist.
Pain in the backside.
Yeah, that's what they are.
Category, isn't it? Really?
Exactly what they are.
Irritants.
Criminals.
Petty criminals.
Petty criminals.
They're not planning a military offensive any time soon.
Right. Well, Emily and Tom,
we've got a lot more else as well. Stick with us.
Midday. But up next on Britain's Newsroom, find out how Reform leader Nigel Farage is channeling his inner Robin Hood. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Hello. Yes, it's time for your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. A fresher feel for most today, certainly compared to much of last week. Bright and breezy, many places dry with some sunny spells, but there are a few showers around across the northwest, close to this area of low pressure. That's what's changed the weather. The winds now coming in from the west, a fresher feel from the Atlantic. Some wet weather across the Northern Isles. That'll continue on and off through the day today. The showers will come and go across western Scotland. The odd shower elsewhere, northwest England, North Wales may be catching one, but many places dry, as I said, bright and breezy. That breeze is, though, quite noticeable, bringing that fresher feel. Temperatures only in the teens in many western areas, but still quite warm across the southeast, 23, 24 degrees Celsius likely here. As we go through the night, we will start to see a change. Things a bit damp in Shetland, but some cloud is gathering out west. But a fine evening nonetheless for East Anglia and the southeast. Temperatures staying in the 20s here, but the clouds steadily increasing from the west, so Northern Ireland seeing the clouds starting to thicken. Still a few showers for the evening across the far north of England, and coming in at times across Scotland, most frequent over the Highlands and the Western Isles, but still some could get through the central belt. And then eyes out west as that thickening cloud in Northern Ireland starts to produce some damp conditions during the evening. Rain and drizzle pushing in across Northern Ireland by midnight. And then that zone of rain spreads into southern Scotland, northern England, north and west Wales. And some of it could be on the heavy side, particularly through the early hours over North Wales and northwest England. Will be a pretty warm night, with temperatures holding up in the mid-teens. Staying dry across East Anglia and the southeast. And might even start sunny here early on Tuesday, but the cloud will increase pretty rapidly. A dull, damp morning for northwest England, North Wales, southwest Scotland. The rain on and off here through much of the day. It does turn a bit brighter, and with some sunny spells across the Midlands and eastern England, it'll feel pretty warm and humid here with temperatures in the mid-20s. Elsewhere again, high teens or low 20s.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world. Am I allowed to talk then? No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
The fact is Trump made a good start, no.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints.
How many fingers have I got up?
About 10. So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m, only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You want to know what's really going on in the corridors of power? Labour don't know what to do with you half the time, and that makes you quite lethal in the chamber. Get behind the headlines with Chopper's Political Podcast. Join me, Christopher Hope, as I sit down with the great and the good of British politics. We'll see where this ruling takes us. These are the stories shaping our nation. Chopper's Political Podcast, available now on all platforms. Listen in and stay ahead.
.40, Britain's News on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner. So this morning, Nigel Farage said he will reinstate non-dom status for wealthy entrepreneurs if they pay a £250,000 fee, which will go into the Treasury and then be redistributed to people who are earning full-time workers but low income. Have a listen.
Our tax take is falling, many talented people are leaving, and we want, as a party, as many entrepreneurs, as many risk takers, as many job creators, as many people paying lots of tax, as many people investing huge sums of money. We want as many of them as possible to be in our country. And that is why today we're coming up with this idea of the Britannia card, which Zia will go into more detail. But we're also doing something with a very specific aim, aimed at those in work. One of the things that we heard so often, heading up to the 1st of May local elections, a young couple that work, pay for childcare, they say, why do we bother? Because the people next door do nothing, and they're pretty much as well off as we are. And so many things that we've talked about making that gap between being on benefits and going to work bigger, and this policy will directly contribute towards that.
Shouldn't be controversial, that, should it? Let's hear what Christopher Hope asked Nigel this morning.
How have you come to this level, this money you're giving away from this non-doms figure? And to Zia Youssef, also to you, do you worry it might be misappropriated? Will it go to two people on the same income in the same family, doubling up? Or will even criminals get it?
Well, hang on a second. This is for working people. This is for, rather like our child tax credits, it's for working people. We're doing everything we can. We've said from the start that we are the party of working people. We are the party of those that get up early in the morning and go to work. We're the party of people who don't want to go on benefits. They want, for their own sense of pride, to keep on working, but find themselves, in many situations, very little better off than the couple that live next door and choose not to work as a lifestyle choice. So once again, we're doing something here aimed at working people. So the idea that criminals are going to get it, etc., just is not going to be the case, all right? How do we reach the figure? It's about finding a figure that we think lots of people will pay, because what we want are lots and lots of job creators, lots and lots of risk takers, lots and lots of entrepreneurs to come into our country. We believe we've got this figure right, and I am certain, I am absolutely certain, this would have a big uptake in the first few years.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more with that. And, the point about criminals getting taxpayer money, I mean, we all know the tens of billions that have been lost to, frankly, incompetence as a result of a government policy. I mean, we could spend an hour talking about all the COVID fraud, for example, which is still entirely unaccounted for. So that is a really good point. And, Nigel's Prime Minister and Reform government will set to work to put a stop to all of that stuff. That's a competence issue. It's not going to happen with this programme. And as Nigel said, look, we look to price it based on a number that people would love to pay. Yeah. That's a really important point. This is not taxing people who are working hard in this country against their wishes and redistributing it. This is money coming from people who would not otherwise be here. And remember, it is just the start of their economic relationship with the Exchequer.
It's nice to see people coming up with initiatives and original ideas, frankly. Yeah. Chancellor Rachel Reeves was quizzed on this earlier by reporters. This is what she had to say about it.
Unveil their plan today for non-doms. How will you entice high net worth individuals to return and invest in the UK?
Well, let's be really clear. What Reform have set out today is a tax cut for foreign billionaires. That would mean either taxes on ordinary working people would have to go up to compensate for those lack of revenues, or the Reform would have to cut public services, including the NHS. So this is a tax cut by Nigel Farage and Reform Party for foreign-born billionaires. Labour's priority is easing the pressure on ordinary working families and investing in our public services, including the NHS.
But of course, her own policy on non-doms has driven millionaires out of the country. Reports that it's one every 45 minutes. We can't. They are our wealth creators. They create the jobs.
And it's not even just that. Their tax policy is forcing business people who otherwise have sort of paid a reasonable level of tax. It's forcing them to take all sorts of measures. It's alerted accountants all across the country to clever little ways of putting stuff in pots and selling properties or buying gold, whatever it is. The rich are hunkering down and hanging on to their money, and they're paying less tax.
They are.
So that is the consequence of it all.
Yeah.
Right, if you've got money to afford to go on holiday, that must be lovely. Here are the top European destinations.
You're looking happy.
Well, the forecast looks good.
So you've sorted the travel insurance then?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Following a peak in the temperatures across the western Mediterranean in the last few days, it is now turning fresher. There are a few showers to watch out for, particularly across areas of Iberia. Generally, though, further east, it's high pressure in charge, and that's allowing the heat to also transfer eastwards. Particularly parts of northern Italy into the Balkans will see those temperatures climbing. But the high pressure also means there'll be plentiful amounts of sunshine for these regions right throughout the week.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Welcome back to Britain's Newsroom with Andrew and Beth.
Hello everyone, Patrick Christie is here.
I'm Michelle Duke, Britain's News Channel.
Access the stories that matter to you. Take the GB News family with you on any device. And as long as you have an internet connection, tune in to GB News anywhere on the planet or beyond. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's News Channel. At GB News, we love to hear from you, our viewers and listeners. So drop us a line at gbnews.com/your say. There you can talk to each other and also to the presenters live on air. gbnews.com/your say, because GB News is your channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation,
no,
isn't it? Because the failure is...
You're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Dubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster, the ultimate clique. And you're fighting like rats in a sack. But here on the Camilla Tominey Show, we ask the questions the establishment media is too scared to ask.
OK, let me ask you a straight question, because I know you're a straight-talking politician.
Whether it's net zero, illegal immigration or law and order, nothing is off limits.
You had the power then.
Yeah, as
and now you've lost it.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show that's fearless.
But no, let me finish my question if you don't mind, because it is my show.
Sundays at 9:30, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on,
we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Welcome back to Britain's Newsroom with Andrew and Bev, and we are joined in the studio by Cameron Walker for a little bit of royal news. Cameron, are we right in thinking that Prince Harry is trying to build a bridge with the royal family?
Well, if reports are to be believed, I think that is potentially correct. Of course, his office is not confirming it, but reportedly he is sending email invitations to Buckingham Palace and Kensington Palace for the King and his brother, the Prince of Wales, to invite them to attend the Invictus Games in Birmingham, which is happening in July 2027. The reason it's done so far in advance, we're led to believe, is because royal schedules tend to be booked up incredibly far in advance. So to ensure kind of the maximum possibility that the King or William could attend the event, that's why the email invitation is going out now, and then the formal one will go out later on. But of course, are they going to attend? Prince William has not spoken to his brother since the Queen's funeral, we don't think, in 2022. There's been a little bit of back and forth between the King and Prince Harry, but of course the King has been advised really not to speak to Harry over the security issue, because it would be unconstitutional for the King to get involved in that. So it's a really tricky situation. What it does show, I think, as I said, these reports are not confirmed, but what it does show is that Harry is potentially hoping that the Invictus Games is a good opportunity. If there is going to be any kind of reconciliation, then that is a time to do it. Because what you have to remember is the Invictus Games, his Paralympic-style competition for veterans, was launched alongside his brother and father back in 2014. They helped him get it off the ground.
And, of course, one complicating factor, Cameron, it's around the time of Camilla, the Queen's 80th birthday, and there will be events for that. So that could clash with the Invictus Games.
Yes, it would clash, and I suspect if it was a choice between one or the other, the King is clearly going to choose his wife's 80th birthday, as Prince William perhaps potentially would as well. So it's a really tricky time, but of course the Invictus Games is not just one day, it's going out for a long week, and it's going to be tricky perhaps for the King and Prince William to turn down the invitation, if they do turn down the invitation, because of course it's a event which is supporting the armed forces and supporting veterans.
Because in some way you could say this is Prince Harry being very manipulative, a little bit scheming and cynical. If he wanted to see his father and his brother, he could just invite them round for dinner next week. He could invite them to come to see him. There's so many ways to go about it. But this is that classic Sussex's passive-aggressive. I'll invite you in 2 years' time, which means you've got it hanging over you and I've got your attention for 2 years. And if you say you're not coming, then what does that say about you supporting veterans?
And he can play the victim card again.
And also it's ending up in papers this morning. Who has told
Who told the papers? They didn't make it up. I know. It's clearly been briefed.
Just very briefly, you were both at Ascot last week, mixing with Royals. How was Friday?
Very nice, very nice. I didn't have a winner, but I had a very jolly afternoon and saw lots of interesting people. I thought Zara Phillips looked sensational.
She did, Zara
lovely
Tindall
blue
now,
trouser suit. Zara Tindall,
brilliant. And also there's speculation perhaps she will take on the Ascot reins for the next generation of the royal family as well.
And the King it looked pretty good, I thought.
He did. Yeah. Really good form. Of course, still living with cancer, but he was there every single day of Royal Ascot this week, which I thought was absolutely incredible.
Did she wave at you?
Camilla, the Queen, she did. She waved. One to another.
Just in case you said it. Wave at all the journalists, Cameron?
I think perhaps she does. She waved at me a few.
It was a special wave. Right, we are done for today. We'll be back at 9:30 tomorrow morning. Emily and Tom are here. See you then.
What comes next in the Iran saga? They threaten retaliation, but is it going to be retaliation on America or America's allies too? We await.
And we're going to be in central London because there's a protest planned to kick off very shortly indeed in support of Palestine action on the very same day that we may see that group prescribed as a terror organisation. Stick with us.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, a very good morning to you. This is your GB News weather update provided by the Met Office. It's a bright and breezy start to the week. We've got low pressure sets just to the north of the UK. Quite a lot of isobars on the chart though means some quite blustery winds are coming in from the west, and a few frontal systems could bring some longer spells of rain to the Northern Isles, where we may see gale strength gusts for a time. A scattering of other showers will be pushing in from the northwest. Those to the east of higher ground, though, may manage to stay largely dry. And particularly for the southern half of the UK, will stay largely fine and settled here, with a decent number of sunny spells over the course of the day. Do remember, though, in that sunshine, UV levels will be high since we are just past the summer solstice. Temperatures in the southeast peaking at around 24 degrees Celsius, so fairly pleasant if you're out of the breeze. It will be that little bit fresher and a little cooler up towards the north, generally around mid to high teens here. As we move into the latter stages of the day, we are going to see the cloud build in more readily across western areas, initially across Northern Ireland, but then across other regions as we see these spells of longer rain gradually pushing their way in. Some stronger winds as well developing around this system. The heaviest of the rain likely across some western hills, but we're also starting to see a southwesterly wind, and so we'll see some more humid conditions to start off Tuesday morning across the south and west. It will be that little bit fresher up towards the north. But generally things will continue to push their way eastwards throughout the day. Again, the rain always heaviest out towards the west. Some areas in the east may manage to stay dry, but a lot more cloud around on Tuesday nonetheless. And in that southwesterly theme, temperatures could just knock up that little bit more, now around 26 degrees Celsius in the south and east, 18 there for Edinburgh and Stonehaven. During the rest of this week, it is going to remain fairly changeable, so expect further showers and rain at times, maybe even a few thunderstorms.
A positive outlook through the night will power through to a bright day ahead. Boxed Home Battery Storage, sponsors of weather on GB News.
£54,321 in totally tax-free cash could make your year the best yet. How would you react if you got that winning call?
Oh my God, I'm going to cry. Oh my God. Thank you.
You weren't expecting to get that call today, were you?
No, I wasn't.
For another chance to win £54,321 cash, text cash to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63225.